Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 262. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge on the comic forums, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the whatnot Segulin, and the Duke of This episode, as we mentioned, our last episode, is an all-green episode. We had a great discussion with friend of the show, Myron Rumsey, from the blog of OA and the podcast of OA, joining us to discuss Green Lantern's film. We talk about Emerald Knights as well, and I'm going to have Myron back actually at the close of the War of the Green Lanterns to kind of follow up on that as well. So I want to thank Myron for filling in on this episode and joining us as we discuss what we thought of the Green Lantern films, pros and cons, and also what we thought of the future of Green Lantern. There's also a nice little tangent in there where we talk about some of the Superman news that's come out recently and our thoughts on what potentially could be happening with things like Lois and Clark's relationship and things like that, and what this all means. Like a lot of fans, we're speculating about a lot of the news as it's coming out, because there's things that are very secretive at the moment. So what we might think is going on might not really be what it is. So it's going to be kind of fun to speculate and have fun with this as we go along. But I do encourage people to remember, a lot of what we're all doing right now is speculation, so kind of keep that in mind. Our sponsors for this episode are DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, I actually want to shout out our summer show contest. Our show contest this summer is going to be, what do superheroes do in the summer? This can be serious or parodies. Tell us what your favorite hero or villain does during the summer vacation, so you can have fun with villains too if you like. This can be a song, comic strip, Photoshop picture. It can be any characters from the past or present of DC. Heck, even have some fun with the upcoming reboot over this. The first prize is going to be a choice of the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen Omnibus or Legends of the Dark Knight Marshall Rogers hardcover. Both of those have been donated by DCBService.com. Second prize gets the alternate book, so whatever the first prize winner doesn't choose, you get the other one. These are two great collections to be getting. Third prize gets a choice from our listener and show-donated comic and trade prize grab bag. We have like a grab bag of comics and trades that some of them are from my personal collection that are brand new items. Some of them are donated from listeners over time. So third prize winner will get a choice of that. Entries are due by the last day of July in any time zone and should be emailed to ragingbullets@gmail.com with the heading of Summer Contest. And this information will all be posted up on the website this week. So if you didn't write any of that down, it'll be all up on our website. So that's our summer show contest. And I want to thank DCBService.com, your comic book pre-order source, for sponsoring this contest. Also want to shout out InStockTrades.com. InStockTrades.com. Speaking of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, you can get Volume 1 of the trade paperback, which we're going to do in August. And this collects Volume 1 of Alan Moore with art and cover by Kevin O'Neill. And it's regularly $14.95, 38% off, only $9.27. And remember, orders of $50 or more give you free shipping from InStockTrades.com. So I want to thank DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com for continuing to support the show. This week had a very sad note. Gene Colan passed away this week, and if you haven't checked out any of Gene Colan's work, actually go to places like InStockTrades.com and check out the amazing work of Gene Colan. The first time as a kid, I grew up with Gene Colan's artwork, but the first time I ever heard him live was on an episode of Comic Geek Speak, and they had an interview with him, and I was struck just by how wonderful it was to hear a classic creator sharing some of his rich history in comics, and just how enthusiastic he still was, even at such a late age in his life, with comics and the comic medium and the art form. And it was just great to hear that. So it's very sad to hear such a nice man and somebody who, a lot of the creators today, even if you've never experienced the work of Gene Colan yourself, a lot of the creators and artists today are influenced by Gene Colan, or influenced by people who were influenced by Gene Colan. This is a creator whose passing is a very sad thing, and I just wanted to shout that out because it happened over this week, and it was a very sad passing. So my heart goes out to the friends and family of Gene Colan. James, what kind of a podcast are we?
Well, we are a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're reviewing in the show. So if we're going over something you haven't read, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
A scarlet costume ejects from his ring. And in a blur of motion, police scientist Barry Allen becomes the Flash.
Joining us once again is longtime friend of the show, Myron Rumsey, from the blog of OA and now also the podcast of OA. Myron, welcome back to Raging Bullets.
Sean, Jim, it's great to be back. I'm glad to see everything is going well, and it's exciting to be back on the show.
We got big things to talk about. I mean, talk about the month of Green Lantern. It's been all over the media in the sense that we got a direct-to-DVD release with Emerald Knights. We've got gaming going on with Rise of the Manhunters on various platforms. Which, Myron, do you have that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so we can talk about Rise of the Manhunter, because I have it on the PlayStation 3, but I also have it on the iPod/iPad version, so it'll be fun to kind of talk about how that works in gaming. But then we also had the feature film, which is what we're going to start talking about today. And as we go in to talk about the feature film, I kind of want to do just quickly initial impressions of the film. And Jim, I'll go to you, then to Myron, then back to me. But Jim, what was your impressions on the film? Because you saw it, you didn't see the 3D version, you saw it in 2D on purpose. But what did you think?
Yeah, well, I saw it in 2D because 3D gives me a vertigo issue. So I find that I can't, when you're watching a movie and you start getting nauseous, it's not a good thing. So I avoid those movies at all possible.
And Green Lantern's not a vertigo book.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, but overall, just quick, the opinion of the movie was actually I really enjoyed it. It was a really solid, really entertaining movie, but it was also this great Green Lantern story. So for me, it was just the cinematography, the way they laid out the story, the kind of those some emotional responses I was getting from Hal being such a a real person, not just some superhero. There was the man behind the ring as well, and I loved just that kind of touching into, because he's such a flawed hero, and he's got such personal human qualities to him, and they really emphasized those in the movie. So this was a great movie, but it was also a great Green Lantern story. So I really enjoyed it, and I was very pleased with it.
Myron?
I enjoyed the movie. I kind of went into it with a bad feeling because of the reviews. I was watching the reviews before the film came out, and was a little disappointed with some of the harshness of the reviews. And I went into the movie thinking, okay, it could not possibly be that bad, and it isn't. I think it kind of was overly criticized. There is some problems with some pacing here and there, but I have to tell you, I remember as a kid walking out of the Richard Donner Superman film, waiting for this kind of a movie to come out. And I walked out of the film feeling the same way. I walked in with no expectations, wanting to just enjoy the movie. And I walked out of it feeling that exact same way I remember feeling when I walked out of the Donner film. Now, I've seen it 3 times so far in 3D and 2D. There are some editing issues, and I think there's some things they cut out of the film. I think they ran out of time. This movie was probably more ambitious than what they realized until they got deep into the post-production, because there are some things that I think are missing. But overall, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, my overall impressions are, first of all, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really good film. Not a great film. It was a really good film, I should say, with lots of moments of greatness. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of what Myron's saying with pacing, and a lot of what you were saying, Jim, I kind of echo a lot of what you're both saying. If I had to give it out of a 5-point scale, I would say a 4 out of 5 for me. I saw it twice. I saw it once in 3D for the first time. The first impression of it when I saw it, I was blown away. I think special effects took over and did all that. The second time is usually a real good measuring stick for me as far as how I actually feel about the film. I went with my wife. She enjoyed it. She knows nothing about Green Lantern other than she knows that he's got a ring, and that's about it. She hasn't read any Green Lantern comics, maybe has seen the character on something that we watched animated or something, but she does not know any background. And when I walked out, I said, what did you think? And I kept trying to hit her for, was there something you didn't like or anything like that? And she had nothing negative to say about the film. She said she really liked Ryan Reynolds as Green Lantern, thought he was great, and I did too. I thought he was really... the casting, that's one thing I want to say that was a strength of this film. The weaknesses that Myron was mentioning with pacing, I think too ambitious is the great way to put this. I think it was trying to do too much, and I think that's what kept it from being, instead of a 5 out of 5, a 4 out of 5 for me.
Yeah, it was only an hour and 45-minute running time, and it really could have benefited from another 25 minutes to a half an hour to really flesh some things out and answer some pieces that are missing that would have, I think, would have made it a stronger movie.
Yeah, or there's certain things that maybe should have been saved for the second film. I don't know what choice would have been better on that, because I'm with you. I honestly would have gladly sat through more.
Yes.
I thought that I think what happened is once you start introducing the core and putting that many characters in there, you're naturally left wanting to know more. And there's characters that are going to be used in certain ways where you don't have enough time to really get to know them. I thought a strength in the film was Sinestro. I thought his development was great. But one of the areas where I was kind of puzzled in the pacing is I don't feel we got, and I know I'm kind of jumping around here, but this is one of the areas where I thought was a weak spot. There's that great bit at the end where we get to see him put on the yellow ring. And oh my gosh, talk about a costume that looks really great on screen. The Sinestro Corps costume looks fabulous. But I was like, why is he putting that on?
Yeah. I was like, there's really no story motivation for him to do that when we just proved that willpower is stronger, other than perhaps the fact that he felt because he lost against Parallax and his ego got in the way. But boy, that's too much of a reveal too soon for me.
Well, and here's the thing. My real impression is that was thrown there at the end for the direct purpose of just making people go, wow, we're going to see that in the next film. I'm assuming the next film, if anybody has any brains, is going to develop the motivation as to why he would do that. If we start the next film with him wearing a Sinestro Corps ring with no backstory to that, I'm going to be sorely disappointed. And to me, that would be a tragedy. I can't imagine them doing that.
Yeah, so that would be a huge missed opportunity.
Right. So I am going to put a disclaimer on that with me saying, like, wow, it was cool, because I thought it was breathtaking that they did it. It worked. I think it was the same kind of teaser that we get at the end of the Marvel films where you'll get just like a quick little blurb that shows this character or that character. They don't always give you like lots of, like Thor's hammer, for example, when we saw that in, was it Iron Man 2?
Yeah.
Where we saw Thor's hammer at the end. There wasn't a whole lot of backstory to Thor for anybody who doesn't know that. It was just meant to be a cool teaser, like, wow, Thor is coming. So this is the same thing. Wow, Sinestro Corps is coming. So I really take it as that versus that there was supposed to be it, but I was kind of left wondering at the end. And I think that's one of the things that happened during the film was there were different spots where I was like Hector Hammond. Fantastic portrayal by Peter Sarsgaard. I loved seeing him as Hector Hammond. I felt like there was a character that we could have done more with in the film.
Yeah. It's when you mention, like, with Sinestro and the costume, I kind of compared it to with at the end of Dark Knight when we saw at the end of Batman when they showed the Joker card, and just that tease, hey, maybe you can deal with him. He's like you, he's got a flair for dramatics, and they showed the Joker card, and everyone cheered at that. And you think about when the next movie came out, Joker was already established, and Joker was already there, and he was already running around, and we really didn't get kind of a backstory motivation. We just got thrown into it. So I don't know if we're going to, what we're actually going to get, with the Sinestro Corps War. We could jump right into the Sinestro Corps and just everything, they could hit the ground running.
That would be a mistake, though, I think. My hope is that we get that film, because I'd like to see it. I will say that. I'm being nitpicky on certain things. I definitely want to see a sequel. Like, I liked this enough that without a doubt, I want to see a sequel. So I want to say that right now. I wasn't like sitting there going, oh, God, they really dropped the ball on this one. I never felt that during the entire film. I really enjoyed it. There are certain nitpicks I have about the film, but they're tiny little things, and I'm going to get into a lot of geeking out, too. I think just because I'm trying to explain where my rating is, that's why I'm kind of starting with some of these little nitpicks. But there's so much of the film that was good and so much of it that worked that when I get into a lot of that, you're going to see why I desperately want to see a sequel. But I do feel that there's certain things that there needs to be some bridging. And that's even room for an animated feature to do bridging. Where that would be a great way to, somewhere along the line, do another one of those DC Direct to DVD. So let's say you're right, Jim, and they are just going to kick off the ground running. Then do an animated feature that's a prequel to it and let people know that, hey, you're going to want to see this before seeing the movie. I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and it's the one thing though. When I had with the sequence with showing that one, I geeked out, and it happened at the very end, and during the credits, and I was just sitting there going, okay, I knew something was going to happen. You knew something, and there was a couple of us waiting around, for it to actually play out, and then boom, it hits. The one thing I was wondering is they kind of implied how the yellow fear can corrupt you, and it looked to me more like Sinestro was corrupted by the yellow as opposed to him choosing to put on the ring.
We did see him, though, his quest early on in it for this other source of power. Because he saw the other lanterns, his whole squad that he went with. Because remember, in the beginning of the film, and this was something that I thought the story developed very well. So I do think there's a reason. I guess maybe I'm contradicting myself here, because now that I'm thinking about what you just said, I've actually got a defense for that. So maybe they handled this a little better than I'm saying. I am being a little nitpicky here. Because looking back on it, remember he wanted that squad so desperately to go after Parallax. Because he wanted to show the Guardians. Because remember, he was like, you seem to have lost your faith in us. You seem to have lost your, the belief in what we can do with our willpower and what we can do. Let me take a squad. Let me go after Parallax. And this is when they were still, kind of holding back from him. Not really telling him everything that was going on with Parallax. And I really liked how he said, no, let me take a squad. Let me go out and do this and show you what I can do. And he went out there and his entire squad was wiped out. He watched that happen. So, and that moment really affected him. Mark Strong really played a great Sinestro. Because you got to see his awe and shock at the power of this Parallax and what it did to a squad of lanterns that was handpicked by Sinestro. He picked that group. So this is a squad he had faith in. They were wiped out instantly in front of him. So that would explain his need to, with his discipline and his sense, his thirst for showing that I'm strong, I'm powerful, look at me, I'm Sinestro. That ego that you mentioned before, that would be a reason for him to want the power when they were building that ring. But originally, I guess to me where the motivation was lost with Parallax being destroyed by the will, it does redeem willpower as being the ultimate power, the ultimate source there. But there's that Sinestro where I didn't do it.
Yeah. Well, there's also the thought that, Sinestro survived the attack. Well, how did he survive and everybody else die? Was he already corrupted by Parallax at that point? Because he's the one that talks him into forging the ring in the first place.
Or is it that... See, and I guess to me, I don't know that I ever felt that Sinestro was corrupted. Maybe Parallax connected with something in Sinestro. Because, when you think about that core and the way it all started, I would not want to see this turn into a story where the explanation for Sinestro going that way is that he was somehow corrupted. I would like it to be shown that Sinestro was always, kind of a natural lead-in to being able to to be able to cause fear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the story of Sinestro is far more powerful if it comes down to he still has the same goal, just his modus operandi is over the line. And that's what makes this story so much stronger.
So I do hope it doesn't turn out to be corruption for him. I do hope that it turns out to be something where it's his choice and...
some of those cool Sinestro stories are the fact that he was brought up on charges of breaking, the most heinous crime to a lantern, instilling fear. And I really wanted to see that kind of, path that he travels and not, even though I said to me it looked like it was corruption, I'm not saying I want that. I want it to be where Sinestro makes the choice. And part of the other thing I was thinking is he could be thinking in his mind that he is strong enough willpower to control the fear, to control the power.
What made you think it was corruption? Because I'm going to be honest with you, I never got that vibe. And I'm not saying you're wrong. What was it in the film that made you think that? Because that interests me. What cued that for you?
At the time of the first watching, it was the look on his face when he put the ring on. It was all the facial expressions. There was just, I want to say kind of a joyous look. And I got this feeling like he was like like a junkie getting a fix is kind of how the emotion I got from him. Then, but also later thinking and about it is when he is talking to the Guardians about forging the ring and everything. You kind of see a little bit. If you know that Sinestro is going to put on the yellow ring, at the end of the movie, and you think about those scenes, you can actually kind of see him already leaning that way.
See, I'm going to disagree with you on that because remember when Hal got the ring for the first time? Do you think he was being corrupted by the will?
No.
But he had those same expressions when he put on the ring, especially when he first powered up in the battery, how it seemed to take over him, and you had this elation from him. It looked very different visually than what Sinestro did, but that would be the different nature of the power source that you're dealing with.
Right, and that's, I think, the difference why, because it is fear, and because it is, in a way, it's the evil version, of the Green Lantern. Even though people will argue evil, I'm not gonna, because of the, what is the yellow light. That's why I was thinking corruption and not thinking that with Hal when he had the enjoyment, because that was just part of, Hal's character. And even when Tomar-Ray was flying, he kind of had a little bit of a grin on his face, like, yeah, you do enjoy it. This is a cool thing. And I think it's more of just the nature of the power. The one is the darker side, the one's the light. And it's, the yin and yang.
Because I saw the same thing happening to him as it was happening to Hal. And you're right, Tomar to a certain extent, but I think we saw Hal so much more using the ring. That's actually something I thought the film did very well. Was, it's funny, we've talked on the show recently a lot how being a superhero is a hard job and you wouldn't want to be a superhero. I walked out of that movie wanting to be a Green Lantern. and the way that they developed that story and just how fun it was for Hal, and just how it gave him a new look and outlook on life and a sense of responsibility. And it really was great use of what's really Hal's true story in comics. They compressed a lot of things that they needed to in the space of a film, but I thought they nailed that. Like, I thought Hal Jordan was perfect in this. We start off with this guy who really is just kind of this thrill jockey, who, is a test pilot, and it's really just anything I can do to get into a plane and do these tests. It's not, about being the most responsible guy. It's about what new thrill can I involve myself in now. And this ring really gave him a sense of something that he always wanted to have, a sense of purpose, a goal, a reason where he could use that skill set that he has in a way that's beneficial. And I loved the development of his story with his dad, which we'll talk a little bit more later on, because I thought that was cool. But to me, one of the strengths of the film was this sense of when you put on a Green Lantern ring, it's a responsibility. But boy, if you can wield that baby, there's a lot of fun to be had.
Well, and you think about it when they're talking, when he had his training segment, which is, for me, is the area I wish they could have fleshed out some more. It was cool seeing going through the training and him dealing with the different, lanterns and just the whole, even the ending fight with him and, a little sparring with him and Sinestro, where Sinestro just wipes the floor with him. I thought those were cool scenes. I wish it had been a little bit longer. But the one thing that they're talking about is just how, if the strength of your will, if your imagination, it's, you bring the devices to make it happen. The more complex, the more stronger, your will is, the stronger your manifestations are, the stronger, it's all, that whole kind of line of thought. And when you finally see Hal, the first time he really makes constructs, when he saves Carol's life, and when he saves the crowd from the crashing...
Sapphire's life. That was cool that she had that as the call name. I want to make sure to make a point of that.
But when he makes that race car, and he makes the track, and it's just, that was just a really just... bam, fun moment that that was something for me that I needed to see that. The big fist thing was cool. The guns were, that was another neat, the anti-aircraft, the big guns that he created, that was a fun moment. But for me, just seeing him with the race car and then the track, and just, you could see he was having fun with it. He was still doing his job, but there was that, that test pilot, that, thrill jockey, that the Hal Jordan,
I was glad that it was a step-by-step process, though. We didn't see him instantly able to create these constructs. The ring, the fist, came out of the fact that it was a happy accident. He was getting beat up, and what was the first thing that his mind created was this sense of, okay, this is a last-ditch chance for me, these guys. And he wasn't really intending to use the ring. It was intending to pull his fist out and hopefully, free himself from the situation. And because there was so much will behind it, this courage to press on one more time in that fight that the ring unleashed at that moment, and he began to really get a sense of, not only did he get a sense of what he was wielding, but that was what activated and pulled him to Oa. I thought that fight sequence was really particularly cool because the guys were ready to beat him up because of his irresponsibility and not thinking of the bigger picture. And that was great character development in that sequence.
And I'm so glad you mentioned the courage he had in the fight, because that, for me, was the big thing.
Yeah.
At that point in time, before he did the constructs, they were pretty much done beating him up. They had given him a beatdown, kicked him a couple times, put the boots to him. They weren't going to go beyond that, and they started actually even walking away a little bit. I think they were done with the beating. They made their point to him. Hey, you got me fired, hot shot, and it very easily could have just let them walk away, take your lumps, and walked away, and going, okay, I'm got a little bit beaten up, but I'm not that bad. Hal said, no, I'm not done yet. It ain't over yet. Come on, round 2 time. And I think that is a definite statement of courage, and it's that really triggering the will and the overcoming of fear and all that really cool Green Lantern-ness.
The spot where he goes, my face is just getting warmed up. It's perfect Hal Jordan dialogue.
What did you think about the development of the character, Myron, of Hal Jordan in this story?
I thought they did a great job of making him very human and very, very flawed. I really enjoyed the fact that there's definitely a character arc there. He doesn't just get the ring and go at it, and he's the guy that we read about in the pages of the comics now. He's that guy in the very beginning who's very broken, and they get to kind of follow his journey a little bit. I think Reynolds, there was a lot of criticism in the beginning because Ryan Reynolds is pretty much associated with comedic roles, but he's also done a lot of drama, and I think this role really showcased his ability to play a spectrum. You had the smart aleck comments like my face is just getting warmed up, but then you had those dramatic moments as well where you see him getting the courage and the strength to fight back.
Especially as the film got on and the situation got more and more dire, where there were points where he had to risk his life with and without the ring. At various points in the film. And I really liked seeing that whether he was wearing the ring or not, he was instinctively taking a lot of those responsibilities upon himself as the film went on. And even though he was acting lackadaisical at certain points in times where things didn't bother him, one of the things I liked that the film captured for us was that it was an outward facade. So a lot of that bravado and joking off things like that, we saw later, that really affected him, especially in the moments when he was with Carol and we saw him take that proverbial mask off. Yeah. That was something that I thought the film really, when I talked about moments of greatness, those were moments of greatness because that's hard to do, where you take a character like you're mentioning, Ryan Reynolds is, kind of, I know him for a lot of comedic roles too, and I like that about him. But he became extremely likable when he was more vulnerable later. And I thought that duality made the film very fun and exciting, yet at the same time very deep and emotion-filled, where he captured a lot of the, I don't even want to say duality of Hal. Hal's more multifaceted than that, and he really captured all of those different facets of the guy. The strength, the humor, the weakness, the love interest, all of that stuff from him. I thought that was really captured well in the whole piece of the puzzle.
Well, and it's funny with, I'm the Superman guy. I love the Lois and Clark relationship, and whenever people talk about Hal and Carol, I never really, it's a cool relationship and I enjoy it, but I'm not that protective of it like I am of Lois and Clark. Seeing this movie, seeing this interaction, this live interaction between the two of them, I'm now protective of that relationship. I loved seeing just those two getting together. And as much as I'm raving about Ryan Reynolds' job, you got to give credit to Blake Lively for her portrayal of Carol. That was a great character. That was another very strong female who you can understand would be able to go toe to toe and hang with a superhero like this. Just their interactions just was a great storytelling, where it was a little bit in the beginning, when he's kind of being a little bit goofier towards her, then as she starts seeing the facade, as she starts seeing it, and then as she sees the hero, and then she sees the broken down man who needs that pickup, she was his rock, she was his strength, and just reminded him of who he is and what he has to do. I loved seeing her and him interactions throughout this movie. For me, that's what made this a great movie. There was some of their interactions and their dealings with each other when he wasn't wearing the ring, or when he wasn't being a Green Lantern. He was just being Hal in the Green Lantern costume, and with between the two of them was what made this movie so much enjoyable for me.
Yeah, they really, I think people in general kind of underestimated Blake Lively's ability to carry that role. And I think she did a great job. She's a different kind of comic book movie leading lady character. I mean, the scene where she recognizes Hal, I think is priceless. Absolutely priceless.
And how many times have people said something like that? Or, come on, just a little mask isn't going to hide who the person is. And she flat out says, you think just because your cheekbones are covered, I'm not going to recognize you?
You're reading a lot of Green Lantern now. I was questioning something that you said. You said that you aren't very protective of their relationship. In the comics now, with the development between Hal and Carol in there, that hasn't increased any of that?
To be honest, no.
Wow.
And when I say I'm not protective of it, I enjoy it and I'm glad I see it. But if they were to break up Lois and Clark, I would be very upset. I'd be very angry.
Oh yeah.
There would be a very reaction from me.
Well, they're married,
right? If they were to end, say, they're done, they're going their separate ways, or kill off one of them, or whatever they're going to do to end that relationship, I'll be like, I hope they tell them a good story.
At least I think they're married.
That's right. Yeah,
I should preface that. I don't really know. When come September, all bets are off.
Right. So we don't know. You may hear a scream coming from my house if I find out, and that's what I mean by protective of them.
Yeah.
With Dan Didio has said a couple of things about that subject.
You know what? That's almost something maybe at the end if we want to discuss it, we can. But
but with Hal and Carol, I would be okay if someone were to say, hey, they're breaking them up, and I'd want to see a cool story arc which explains why they're not going to be together, why they made this final commitment to be apart when they're so good together. But I wouldn't be angry. I'd enjoy the story. Whereas you could have the greatest. The greatest writers craft the breakup of Lois and Clark, and I will be angry.
Okay, wait, hold that thought. Okay, let's remember Hal and Carol, their relationship. We'll go back to that in a second. I think we have to discuss this right now because Myron made an interesting point there. Dan DiDio has mentioned in interviews recently Lois and Clark. Let's talk about that for a second because we might as well. The exact words were that Lois and Clark's marriage is being re-examined. Now, I've seen a lot of uproar to this. The word re-examined doesn't necessarily mean to me that they're breaking them up. Are you guys getting the impression that that's what they're doing? Because I do see that that's a possible outcome of that. But the exact words were that they was being re-examined from all angles or something like that. It's around that category. And I don't necessarily take that to mean that they're being broken up as far, or more so that they might be showing us how they wound up getting married and what that marriage means to them. So, that's another potential possibility on that, but I don't know. Have you guys been following any of this, and what do you think it means? Myron, go ahead. Seeing as you mentioned Didio's comments, go ahead and...
Well, I think that they're kind of hinting at it pretty strongly that it's not going to be there come September. The rumors are that it's going to be, Wonder Woman and Superman are going to hook up. How accurate that is, it's hard to say. They're playing things pretty close to the vest, and Didio is saying things, but sometimes when he says things, he says them intentionally to try to get you to think one thing, and it doesn't mean that's necessarily what's going to happen.
But see, to me, that also could mean that what we're going to get is a story showing how they wound up together.
Yeah.
So the end result might be that we do have them. They might not start out together, but they will wind up together.
Yeah. I almost think they're reciting the relationship a little bit. I don't know.
To show people how they got there, almost like a Lois and Clark secret origin. Would you have an issue with that, Jim?
See, here's the thing: if we're youthening, all the heroes, and we're making them younger.
I hate that.
I know, I had to do that to you. But if we are de-aging people and we're taking them, making them a little bit younger, I wouldn't have a complete meltdown if they weren't married at this point in time. If they were going to explore the whole, maybe we'll see them in the dating process or getting to know each other. But if they were to completely just throw out the relationship or say, it's over and we're not going, then I would get very angry.
Here's my question, though. I guess, do you have an issue if this is a Superman reboot where it's before they got married? Does that change things for you? Because I don't know. And then please, I'm looking at either we're going to, because I know there's two different Superman books, and from my understanding of them, and this is just from rumors I'm seeing and little tidbits, so I'm not 100% sure exactly on what we're seeing in September. So every comment I'm throwing out here is based on just speculation. But if there's two different Superman titles and they're taking place in two different time periods for Superman, there is a good possibility, though, that both books might take place at a point in his career before he married Lois. So it's not that they are saying that the marriage never happened, it just hasn't happened yet. How do you feel about that? Does that change anything for you?
You think about Smallville.
Mm-hmm.
When Smallville came out and Lois wasn't in the picture, I wasn't angry. I wasn't angry over it. I knew that, in the future, Clark was going to, get to Lois. And then when they first introduced her, she was those two weren't together. They were dancing around the big dance. And, she was with, Ollie and had a little flirtation going on with Arthur and just everything that, but there was always the little tease that it's going to happen between the two of them. They're going to get together. Then they started to get together. And then it just the whole process up until the end of Smallville where we get, the wedding and just them together happily ever after and whatnot. So that whole process, I was never angry at the series, at the Smallville series, because I knew where it was going. Especially once they introduced the character, I knew they started giving little teases. Now, if come September when they're doing this, if they're not together, but you have the little teases, you have the little bit of interaction, I'll be fine with that because I know, okay, this is before it happens. But if as I said, if they whitewash it, if they get rid of it, and there is going to be no Lois and Clark together, that you will hear a great amount of rage and anger. Because while it would be cool to see, Clark and Diana together, and Superman and Wonder Woman together, that's kind of neat. But this, for me, it was always the strength of the human strength of Lois that made Clark such a great hero. And to me, I love that. I love that whole this godlike person who is in love with this mortal woman.
There's a huge difference between taking a relationship that's currently going on and having them fall apart. It's the current continuity Superman at this point in time in his career, and we're ending the marriage, wiping it out, pretending it never happened, whatever you're going to do, and rebooting the character beforehand. And I don't know that that's what they're doing, because I've heard that there's a possibility that Morrison's book is going to take place at a different time period than the Perez book. So if that is in fact true, which I don't know if that's going to be the case, there's a possibility he could be with Lois in one and not with Lois in the other because of time periods, or both could take place too early. I think it's too soon to tell on that. I'm not all in an uproar on it because I don't know what they're doing yet. So I'm nervous and tentative. I don't know, Myron. What about you? Was there anything in there that made you? How did you feel about all that when you were hearing those news?
Well, I think that if they do anything, if they reset anything, I think it's because they want to explore the relationship. I don't think they're going to turn a blind eye to it, obviously. But I think if anything, they almost want to start over to the point of letting you see why that relationship is so important to Superman and to Lois and to Clark. So no, I'm not too awful worried about it. I don't think they're going to upset the apple cart that much.
And that's the kind of I wouldn't have too big of an issue if they're just re-looking at it and going through, but it's still going to be there and where it's going to go through. I wouldn't have a problem with it, especially if this is taking it before they got together. They want to have some stories where they talk about maybe Clark or Superman and dealing with some other type of relationships. I'm okay with that, but I was worried about them doing what they did with Spider-Man, where how they ended Spidey and Mary Jane's marriage, and it was just that one issue, boom, everything done.
Did you read any of that?
I didn't read any of it.
You're kind of overgeneralizing that.
True, but that was my fear, that it was going to be something like just done. Okay,
and it isn't going to be that, because that was current continuity Spider-Man, where. He went on afterwards, and everything that had happened to him before had happened. So it's a very different scenario here. A lot of what Myron said, I think, is a very good possibility of what is going to happen here. We are going to get like a deep exploration as to why these two wound up together, how they wound up together, and what it means to each to be together, which actually might be better for us as readers who are fans of their relationship, if they do that. And again, this is speculation at this point, but if they did something like that, I think a lot of times they don't do enough with the Lois and Clark relationship in the comics. So to have that brought back to the forefront again and be something that is strengthened by this, if they go that route, could be a really good thing for Superman, where we get some really central development as to what's important to this guy, why, who he is, what brings it to the what it brings to the table. So I don't know. I don't know what this is going to look like come September. There's a part of me that thinks this could be terrific for Superman, and it could be a bad thing depending on what route they go. So there's a lot. I don't think there's one possibility here. And a lot of times when I see some criticism of this, I'm seeing people thinking one way. And, you know, without us knowing exactly what they're going to do, this is turning quickly into what happened when Paul Cornell was going to take over Action Comics, and everyone was in uproar because they were putting Lex Luthor with Lois Lane, when it turned out to be a robot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, you know, we don't know what the storytelling is going to look like until we actually have the product in our hands and see what they're doing. And Myron's comment about it being a possibility that this could lead to some really strong central development of what puts these two together and what that relationship means is what I hope from this. I don't know that that's what's going to happen, but I would love to see that. And there's a strong possibility they might go in that direction. If they didn't, it would be a missed opportunity, I think. So I don't know. Back to Carol and Hal and how this all works. I wanted to talk a little bit about their relationship in comics right now, because one of the things I've liked about her taking on this role as leader of the Star Sapphires is a lot of the strength that we see from Blake Lively's character in the film is a lot of what I'm really enjoying about her in the current multi-core storytelling that we're getting in Green Lantern. We're seeing a Carol who's being a Star Sapphire now and coming to terms with that role, what that means. We're seeing a Carol who, you know, a lot of that independence, a lot of that strength. She's not just doting. She's in love with Hal, but that's not all that she is. There's something more to her than that. And there's that sense of she realizes there's a very good possibility the two of them aren't going to wind up together. And I like that duality. But yet you know that if the opportunity presented itself, he feels the same way that she does. They'd like to be together. I found their relationship that much more compelling. And I'm not as protective of them. I understand what you're saying now as far as I don't see them as being married. But I am protective of them in the sense that I want to see storytelling with both in the book. So I am protective of her. I don't want to see her be a character that's lost. I would love to see more exploration of what they mean to each other. And, you know, as he progresses in the coming year, I would love to see some romance rekindled again with these two. I don't know if it's possible, you know, because both of their lives are very complicated.
Yeah, and is something I'm curious what's going to happen with the whole reboot, with her, with the color war, with all the multicolored cores, and this. There's a lot of just these characters, like, you know, Carol, you know, that in the current continuity has a very strong role, you know, and a very strong presence in the Green Lantern books. Will she still have that same presence, you know, later on, or
have you been watching the September solicits? Have you seen the books that are coming out in September from Green Lantern? It doesn't look like much changing in the Green Lantern universe at all.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess I don't feel. I mean, I think there's going to be changes that reflect the state of things around them. I don't know, Myron, are you seeing there going to be a huge change to Green Lantern?
I don't think that because the books are selling so well, I don't think you're going to see a lot of changes to the status quo. It's interesting that the cover to Green Lantern New Guardians, there is a Star Sapphire on the cover, but we don't know which one. That's kind of grayed out still. Will it be Carol? Will it be Fatality? Or will it be someone else? I don't know. I mean, it could end up being Swarnak Natu with longer hair. Who knows? I don't.
She's on. You know what? She's on the cover of Green Lantern Corps.
Oh, that's right. She is. You're right. I forgot. I don't see a lot of things changing. Although it's interesting that there's not a cover with Hal on it yet. And yeah, he's on the cover of Justice League, but it's also been said that the first issue is going to deal a lot with the formation of the League in flashback. So is that cover in current continuity, or is it a flashback? So who knows, really. Hal is the one character whose future has not been defined yet in terms of current continuity. So who knows what's going to happen. I hope they don't throw him out and do something different with him and upset that whole continuity that they've built over these last 5 or 6 years. But then again, if they think it's time for a change and to do something different with the character, it'll be an interesting ride if they do.
It's funny, on the Green Lantern issue, we don't know who that is.
Yeah.
So
and they've said they're not tampering too much with the Green Lantern line, and there's been that ongoing thing. Who's the new Green Lantern of Sector 2814? So who knows? Will as a result of Flashpoint, will Abin Sur still be alive?
Be interesting to see what Hal... Oh, you mean that Hal... Except how would then Kyle have ever become Green Lantern?
Yeah, I don't think Hal will be gone, but it'd be interesting if Hal's new partner is Abin Sur. Or maybe Hal is the partner of Abin Sur and not vice versa.
That would be interesting to see. I don't know what's going to happen there. It's interesting to me to see... Yeah, and you're right, there's a possibility we could come back from this and we get a character back that we didn't expect in Abin Sur, who I'm loving in Flashpoint.
Oh, yeah.
So I would not be against seeing Abin Sur come back. I'm going to go out on a limb and say I don't think we're going to get that, but...
I don't think so either.
Yeah, I don't think
but none of that's a reboot.
Limb, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Again, though, guys, none of that's a reboot.
No.
Because if you take a look at everything that's going on in the Green Lantern books, nothing in Green Lantern looks like it's being undone.
No.
It looks like in the set, like if that character comes back, that would mean that all of what's been happening is kind of folded into Abin Sur being back, but it's that time progression still there for the Green Lantern books. I think that's a set. You made an interesting point about Justice League. If that first arc is going to be flashbacks, that means the Superman Wonder Woman relationship can be flashbacks. It does not have to be what's currently going on with the character in his books. So that's why I'm saying, all bets are off right now. I don't necessarily think everything that's being teased necessarily means that is going to be where the characters are currently.
It's this stuff is kind of the unknown makes the waiting a little bit exciting, but it does. There are points in time when I'm getting angry. I'm like, I want to know now. The impatience, can kind of swelter up and hit, or I'll go and I'll read other rumors and this and that online, and you're like, I know, I want to know the truth.
Well, see, here's the danger that people run into. First of all, you should feel that. If you don't care, they're doing something wrong. So you should want to know what's going to happen in September. The difference is you can't read rumors or isolated little teasers that they give you and take that to be the whole issue. And that's part of the problem I see on forums where people are getting downright angry. I'm like, until the book's in your hands and you've actually read what they're doing, you don't know. No, it's really the reality of it. Now, you might hate it after you read it. And if that's the case, you've at least read it and you hate it and you didn't like the direction they were going in. But until you've actually read it, you don't know if they're doing things deliberately with the purpose of trying to surprise you, which could very well be the case in all of this. I don't know what it's going to lead to. And that does get me really excited to know what direction they're going in. I do think that they do realize that they've got a very strong fan base, that while they're trying to attract new readers, they would be insane to be sitting there saying, hey, let's make sure we slap everybody who's been following us in the face. They can't do that. I mean, that's suicide. Because, you're going to take a risk, but you got to take a calculated risk when you're doing it. So you're going to reboot things while at the same time saying, how are we going to keep these people happy? They have to be considering that. If they're not, they're insane. And I don't think that. It's especially with Green Lantern. Green Lantern to me looks pretty protected. Batman looks pretty protected.
Yeah.
Just from what I've seen
There's
with the
going to be
solicits.
some tweaks going on in the Bat universe.
Damian is proof that Batman's pretty protected.
Yeah, but for me, it's always always comes back to Tim, and he's going to be around. But I think they're tweaking him a little bit and making some modifications. But as an overall, I think we're still going to have the same, Tim. We're going to have the same, Damian. We're going to have Bruce back and Dick as Nightwing. So there is, you can say that the Bat family is pretty much intact.
Well, Batman Inc. happened.
Yeah,
and is still happening. Because they're going to relaunch Batman Inc. So, that looks pretty safe with little tweaks like you mentioned. My curiosity is going to be what happens to the Batgirl line.
Mm-hmm. Well, as I said, it's always for me. It's the supporting cast that I'm curious about, and for me, I do put Carol as a supporting cast. I put any and all of the colors as supporting cast. Kyle. And even just throwing out Kyle and John and Guy. I do wonder what is going to happen with them. So there is a lot of just unanswered questions, and it's the unanswered questions that are both fun, neat, and exciting. But there is that level.
Well, we
of
know
fear.
what's happening with Guy and John.
Yeah,
and we know what's happening with Kyle. Hal's the question mark at the moment, which I didn't expect to be saying. But that's really the only character that we really don't 100% know, right, Myron? I think that because we've seen both Kyle.
Have we seen John?
Yeah, John's in Green Lantern Corps. He and Guy are right on the front cover.
Okay,
both with rings.
Yeah, the only place you've seen Hal is on the cover of Justice League.
My question is, depending on the nature of that New Guardian series, is what is Kyle's role? And I think that decides a lot for Hal. Because if Kyle has taken on an entity again...
he may be a Guardian.
Right.
I don't know.
Well, and I mean, the title is New Guardians.
Right.
So, I don't know.
Now, one thing I was wondering, because as we from the movie, we were talking about this Carol's portrayal, and for me, my real dealings with Carol have been recent stuff. So the long-term Carol and Hal stories, I really never read or had much of an exposure to them. Is her portrayal that we saw in the movie with how she was actually there for him, was that a accurate representation of what we had in the past?
Yeah, very much. Actually, it was compressed because there was a long stretch where Hal was in love with Carol. It was the old story where Hal was in love with Carol, and because of who he was and his nature, and being unreliable, and her role in Ferris Aircraft, she wasn't interested in him. She actually was dating Hector Hammond, so they put all that in. Hector was more suave, and then all of a sudden Green Lantern shows up on the scene, and she falls for Green Lantern, which Hector Hammond resents. And Myron, correct me if I'm getting any of this wrong.
No, you're correct. You're correct.
And that was the relationship there. But Carol always was like, while she was doting after Green Lantern, there was still a strength to Carol in her role at Ferris Aircraft to take that over there. And it did take her out of the cockpit. Very similar to what, they were mentioning in the film, where Hal and her were having that debate over that. So the film compressed a lot in a very quick period of time. I actually kind of liked, I don't know, Myron, how you felt about this. I liked that she recognized who he was.
Yeah, I thought that was great.
Which normally I don't go for that, but like the whole mask thing where she's like, just because you're hiding your cheekbones, dude, I've seen you naked. I like that because obviously to any of us who know him as a character, we knew he was Hal, and he looks like Hal when you're in there. But to the general public, you can get away with that type of thing. I liked that aspect of it.
I like the fact that they changed his eye color when he powers up and with the mask, so it's not even the same color eyes, it's the different color eyes. And just when he first approached her, he was kind of like distorting his voice a little bit. He wasn't doing a Batman voice exactly. It sounded to me more like the ring was kind of disguising his voice.
Kind of what Green Arrow does in Smallville.
Yeah. And so I thought that was a neat little kind of just little extra stuff that just completely gets dropped immediately. And I don't know about y'all when you saw it, but that scene was one of the scenes that got a really good. There was a nice little pop laughter from the audience from that line. And by the end of the movie, the audience I was sitting in, we got into the movie. I willing to bet I wasn't the only person holding up my fist to the screen when he was fighting Parallax at the end, and Parallax was doing the mind games, and he's just sitting there reciting the oath and just focused and fighting it. I know I wasn't the only person who was kind of willing him along with him.
I didn't do that. I really didn't.
Well, it's the people in my theater that did it. Okay?
I was about to. My wife put her hand in my hand and said, "No, honey, you got to sit down."
But talking about that scene you're talking about, and one of the things I really liked about that was it goes back to that courage we were talking about earlier. We saw him in a moment where he is being overwhelmed by this creature that only Abin Sur had been able to capture before. And here's the successor to Abin Sur in this moment where he is being severely beaten down. and he's reciting the oath, and you're really getting this sense of a mental battle that Hal's going through, which is something that's important that I think is often it's often lacked when you read Green Lantern stories, and you don't get this sense of. I liked when Green Arrow put on the ring, and we got to see just how much willpower goes into even making a simple arrow. What Hal was going through in those moments, and Ryan Reynolds did a great job with this, and special effects were great, but he was the acting of that. This sense of him crouched into this whole pressure of Parallax's power surrounding him, and you see him just willing himself, and the oath was really just channeling all of his willpower into the ring. You got the sense he was saying that to focus and charge himself and burst out from that. I thought that was just really just a brilliantly, tremendously well put together sequence of events. That's one of those greatness moments I was talking about, and you want that culminating battle between those two to just really have that sense of wow. And I had a few issues with the whole Parallax thing, and it's just, it's the comic book purist in me. I wanted to see the Parallax story a little bit closer to what it was in the comics. But I thought that they developed the sense of Parallax being this and I think it was they were trying to avoid getting into too much of the entity lore. Because if you tried introducing that on top of the core, on top of everything else, I think I don't think they could have introduced anything more in this film. So I get why they did what they did. I don't know that his battle with Parallax had to be with Parallax, but it could have been with some other, space entity or something like that. I do think that the link, though, with Parallax and Sinestro might be something explored in the second film. So I don't know if they'll go that route, in which case that'll totally throw my argument out the window. But that sequence of events, that battle, was to me part of the greatness in the film. When those moments happened, I was like, it went from just being a very good film to having a great moment in the film. And there was a lot of those, and that was one of them. The relationship between Hal and Carol, too, is one of the other moments of greatness, because I think that was something that, just kind of go, woof. Well, what did you think, Myron? I just want to give Myron a chance to. What did you think about Parallax and how Parallax was handled in this film?
I thought it was really neat to see that, when you saw Parallax there was a lot of allusion to the Fantastic Four Rise of the Silver Surfer, Galactus Cloud Monster. But if you looked closely, you could see that there were, all the souls of the people that Parallax had absorbed were struggling to get out. You could see the arms coming out. And I thought that was really cool. And the fact that they made him talk and try to seduce Hal and saying you're not strong enough, I thought it was well played. I think it was difficult to come up with a design that was going to work on film for the immensity that they were trying to portray. I know early on they actually played with the insectoid version of Parallax, but for whatever reason they chose not to go that route. Maybe it didn't look right for trying to carry on a conversation. Clancy Brown did the voice of Parallax. I don't know if you guys know that, but he did the voice of Parallax, and I just thought it was a well played out way to do the whole character. You got the sense of enormity and how massive it is that as fear grows, as he feeds off of fear, he gets bigger and bigger.
Yeah, my only minor issue was the whole this sense that he was a guardian.
Yeah.
I wish they had gone the route of it was this being that seduced the Guardian and had taken him over, a la what we've seen with Hal. But once you get past that and you get into actually what Parallax was doing and how I agree with Myron 100%, I liked this sense of Parallax talking like we've seen him talk in the comics, how he'll still try to seduce Hal to this day. How he'll do it with Kyle and Guy, with Kyle and John, right? Because didn't John get seduced by him, or who is it? No, Kilowog. It's Kilowog's the other one. I'm sorry. That was what Kilowog and Kyle, I think, had in common, was the fact that they had overcome it previously. And Hal had to deal with that same thing, too. I loved it was in the recent issue where they had that commentary over why these characters, because of their being touched by that, they were able to overcome it.
Yeah, see, for me, I like the fact that he was a former Guardian, and that they didn't go the route of the entity. And the reason I liked it was because some of the stuff you said about how they've introduced so many
Agreed.
concepts that they made it for the the universe, for the movie universe, that Parallax was a fallen Guardian. And I was sitting there, and it was funny because when they first started seeing signs of him and they first started showing him, I'm looking, and my first thought that did pop in my head was Scar. Just with everything that happened with Blackest Night and Curse, I'm like, oh, I wonder, hey, and then sure enough, it is a fallen guardian. I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. I really enjoyed it for the movie, and I thought that was a great way to use it. And they do leave the entity concept open, and that was also adding to part of my, wondering about the seduction of. The yellow ring. Maybe there is going to be an entity clause introduced.
And as I said, overall, I liked Parallax. But as I said in the beginning, there were some nitpicky issues, and I said it's nitpicky. It's a nitpicky thing. But it is something that I would have liked to see it be an entity do that. That was just me, though. Oh, yeah. It didn't take away from a movie that I really enjoyed, but it was little tiny things like that I was like, ooh, I kind of would have liked to have seen this route. But I said it's the purest thing. We have this happen in film. It happens in Batman. I thought Batman Begins and The Dark Knight were probably my two favorite Batman films of all time now, just because of how well they capture, especially Batman. Actually, I do give a slight edge to Begins, because I loved so much the character development of Bruce in that film. But there were little tweaks and things that they did in that to make it work for film that I'm like, ooh, I wish they would have gone this route. But it's the same thing here with this. It didn't take away from my enjoyment of the film, but I would have liked to have seen it a little closer. That's just me.
And one thing I'm wondering on you guys, both of you, because when it comes to Green Lantern, I do consider you both as having a little bit more history, more experience with with being green than I do. Because as I said, growing up, I was always, when it came to comic books, it was, was more of Superman, more of a little bit of Batman in there. And I did have some introduction to Green Lantern with the whole, with Hal dying, with everything with the Parallax thing, but it wasn't anything that I was like, oh wow, this is the greatest thing, I want to pursue.
What about the Super Friends? Did you see the Super Friends when Hal was on Super Friends?
Yeah. So I knew who he was, and I had, for me, really, I read more straightforward stuff when it was some of the Jon Stewart stuff.
Okay.
With Green Lantern Mosaic. I read that some of the Guy Gardner stuff when he first gets when he's Warrior, and I read some of that stuff, and it wasn't really. I didn't read much of Hal other than the big Parallax moment and when he flies into the sun. I read that, but for me, it's when I think about this, and the one person that I have almost little to no dealings with is Hector Hammond, and that was a character that I found very interesting in the story. That I knew who he was. I kind of had an understanding of his powers, and the shift they did for the movie with making him get infected by Parallax, and that's where his powers were coming from. For me, it was an interesting experience because I didn't have this locked-in love of Hector Hammond and knowledge of this is where Hector comes from. What about you guys? How did you look at Hector in the movie?
Myron, go ahead.
I thought they kind of portrayed Hector as a tragic figure, the way that he was treated by his father and how he responds to that, and that what he gets from Parallax is as much a curse as it is giving him the ability to do anything. I think it was more torture for him to hear what everybody else was thinking. I think he kind of lived in a world where he didn't tell himself that's how people looked at him, and then to actually be confronted with that just pushed him right over the edge. Peter Sarsgaard did a great job of making him very sympathetic and yet very creepy at the same time.
Yeah, and it was funny because I kind of have that similar feelings where I did feel bad for the guy because, I know I would not want to know what people think around about me, just when I'm hanging out with, especially coworkers and, people you think, they think you're an all right guy. And I'd be worried. I'd walk up to him and be like, oh God, not Jim again. Please don't talk comics. Please don't talk comics.
Oh God, he's going to say Ethan.
Exactly. Stuff like that.
Oh, did I say that loud? No, I think that's everybody's danger because I think we all get frustrated with each other from time to time. I mean, the people you're closest to. You and I are best friends. I consider you like a brother. But, I mean, God, we do podcasting for how many years together where we're doing this? I mean, and aside from that, our friendship outside of the show, there's going to be times where we frustrated each other. And if you take isolated thoughts that people have of each other, think of how that would destroy relationships. I thought that was something great about the use of Hector. First of all, when Hector Hammond started heading down the path that Parallax put him on, that was very true to the comic. the big difference with him, and Myron, correct me if I'm wrong on this, or if you see it differently. The big difference was the Hector Hammond I remembered was very cocky, very kind of. He was a wheeler and dealer and, had it all together. And, Hal, actually a lot more like his dad than in the movie. Tim Robbins' character was a lot more what Hector was like.
Yeah, he was very smarmy in the comics.
Yeah. So Tim Robbins actually played a good... what Hector was like in the comics. I liked the change there, which is funny. There's things that I nitpicked, and there's other things like that's a very big change because he was a lot more in the comics like Tim Robbins' character, and I quite liked that. My one issue with the Hector Hammond thing is and this is where, and I think it's the strength of what Sarsgaard was doing, as he became more and more the Hector Hammond that we do see today in the comics, where the head started to blow up and we got to see the powers there, and how he's pathetic, but yet there's that thirst for knowledge and power and everything he does with the ring and all that, and still having that love for Carol, because the love for Carol is something that was accurate to the comics, his feelings for Carol, and seeing why Carol would have fallen for him when he was more of that smarmy kind of character. I thought the film handled that very well. His relationship there. I didn't like seeing him destroyed when he was. I would have liked to seen the character reoccur later on. And with it being a comic film, there's always possibilities to bring back Hector Hammond if you wanted to. There's ways to make that work. I don't know that I felt that was... I guess maybe it was a way to show just how powerful Parallax was. And it was a way to bring Parallax to Earth.
Yeah. It's funny because, when I first saw it on the screen, I got angry. I was like, oh, man, they're doing it again. They're killing off villains. And I don't like seeing that in the movies. Then I started thinking again about just, one thing about how it was a great way to pull him down to Earth, how to draw, Parallax to Earth. But the other thing I did think about, I'm like, this is a movie universe. Movie universes maybe will last 3 or 4 movies. And then they'll reboot it again because by the time the 4th movie comes out, you're at a whole new generation and they're not going to want to jump in on 5, 6, 7, etc. So when the reboot happens, they can always bring back Hector Hammond. And who knows how, what they'll do with like a character like Sinestro. They can't kill him off. They got to keep him around. But some of these other characters, they can introduce them and kill them off, because it is the movie universe.
Did you think his dying was necessary in the story? Because I questioned that. And Myron, I'll ask you that first. Did you think Hector Hammond needed to die in that sequence? Because I don't know. That was the one part where I'm kind of like, I wasn't mad about it. You mentioned that it angered you the first time you saw it, and I know you're in a different place now with it. But for me, I was like watching that. I wasn't angry, but I was kind of like, I don't know that was really necessary to happen to him. Especially in the second viewing. It didn't anger me or anything, but I was just kind of, I'm not a fan of it. I think that's what it is. Like you said, it's not something that I really like seeing. But Myron, how did you feel about that?
I think it would have been better had he not died. I would have loved to have seen Hal save him in the movie, rather than Parallax. When I think that would have been kind of neat to see Hal at that point step up and interject and get in the way and prevent Hector from dying. I think that would have been kind of a neat way to show the symmetry of the character, and he's willing to step up, and the difference between the two is that he's willing to do something tough like that, whereas Hector won't. Yet their lives, the way it was portrayed in the movie, their lives were so parallel in so many ways. I think that would have been more interesting to me.
I kind of thought that what they could have done, it was that great Carol scene when she fires the rockets at Parallax as he's attacking Hal. They could have shifted and had the rockets fire earlier, and had the rockets when they were hitting on Hector. And that would have broken the connection. Then Hal, does like the flying tackle, gets Hector out of the way, and then either gets the ring back from Hector or, somehow, gets his ring back, and then they continue on with the fight. I thought they could have done that to save Hector, but in the end, when I finally got adjusted and comfortable with it, I think it kind of added to just the sheer just evilness and just the nature of who Parallax is, and just the whole, and even it added to a little bit more of the energy of when Carol does the save for Hal. That just because right before that we just saw a main character die that way, so I'm now leaning towards it was a good story moment told in the movie that it kind of needed to happen.
pivotal to that moment, and actually I will agree with this. I don't know that he needed to die in that moment, and maybe that was the best way to handle it. I will agree with you that having Hector away from that sequence was necessary. I guess the geek in me would have preferred Hector to somehow, like a sniveling idiot, sniveling creep that he is, kind of be saved and skirt off to the side. But rather than having the missiles go off earlier to save Hector, it really needed to be this moment where Hal's without the ring. He tells Carol to stay where she's at, and he goes rushing out to get the ring in some attempt to try and get that and hold off Parallax himself. So he's putting himself at risk, but at the same time saving Carol. I loved the strength of Carol in that moment. And it was a great moment where Carol came in, and she's, because that was important. I like seeing strong female characters in that. And she rushed into that moment and said, you know what? I can do something here. I can buy him that pivotal moment that he needs to be able to get the ring. And she went in and did that, and I think that meant so much more. Whereas if Hector was there, it's like, how do we, keep Hector out of that exchange? And they really needed him out of the exchange.
True. I think it would have been great character moment for Hal this is an illustration of how he puts somebody else in front of himself. Somebody else gets to be first, and he puts himself in harm's way without the ring. And I think that would have shown how the character had changed.
And maybe, see, it's funny, what I would have preferred to see in that moment when Hal is running out in that moment, maybe Hector escaped due to distraction.
Yeah.
And I don't know with an entity the strength of Parallax, if you can, you'll be sitting there, well, why didn't Parallax just stop him anyway? So I guess there's that kind of problem as well, that then everything that I'm kind of jumping through, or I'm thinking of ways Hector could have gotten out of there without dying, I'm kind of contradicting by thinking, you're saying this entity is this powerful. Look at, he absorbed how many lanterns at once? So now we're going to say that Hector's able to sneak off. So I've run through a bunch of different scenarios that I would have liked. I don't have one. So I will say that it's another nitpick that I have, his dying, because I haven't been able to find a way to get him out of it yet that I like. So obviously the writers ran into a similar problem as I'm running into right now. So I will put a disclaimer on that and say, as with other nitpicks that I have in the film, it's a nitpick. I don't have a solution to it, so I get it. I loved the moment that precipitated because of it between Hal and Carol there. I think it added. Blake Lively was terrific in this. For every compliment that I'm going to give to Ryan Reynolds, I'm going to give it to her. Mark Strong, I thought, was tremendous as Sinestro in all this. The actor for who is it again that did Parallax's voice?
Clancy Brown.
Clancy Brown, I thought, was tremendous because it really, I think from now on, whenever I hear Parallax in the comics, when I ever see that, I'm going to associate Clancy Brown with the voice, because that, for as much as I thought that they changed and tweaked a little bit of the Parallax origin in this, I did feel by the end that it was Parallax and it was the entity. The visual change versus the comics, I thought was very minor. Because I actually liked, like Myron said, a lot of the tweaks where you got to see the people trying to escape from him.
Well, that whole sequence, that city sequence where he's just flying through and this, he had a high body count on civilians and just instantaneously sucking them dry, where the core, it took longer. For the different characters, it was a little bit different. For a regular, normal person, you see this big black cloud of, evilness flying down you. You're going to be terrified, and he's just going to have a nice, easy, in, done.
Nice, easy what?
A nice, easy, in, done. Right. There's going to be...
Chip wasn't in the movie.
Wasn't he? I thought I saw a little squirrel flying around somewhere.
That was the animated one. One character we didn't talk about that I'd like to is Tom. Because I really liked his role in this. How he was kind of Hal's confidant during all this, and he knew. And what friend wouldn't, if you knew that your friend had this powerful ring, say, "Hey, I want to see this." Yeah. What do you mean you're not going to show me? And that relationship between the two of them, I thought, was very well done. I liked that his role was he was there during the whole test run, and he was cheering on Hal even at times when he shouldn't have been.
Well, the whole thing when he's like, they told the alien that gave it to me said it's a great responsibility. Responsibility? You? It's like, yeah, I know. What was he thinking? I howled at that.
Right. And yet I never got the point that it was meant to be a 100% of a slam from Tom. It was the same kind of friendly banter that you have between two friends where you'll do that to each other. But yet I really got the feel that the two of them were friends and that there was a respect between the two of them that was there. I really enjoyed the character of Tom in this.
Yeah. I think Tom is one of those the way they put him off in the movie. He's the friend who doesn't cut you any slack when he knows you're doing the wrong thing, and the picking or the the slamming of Hal is to remind him, hey, you're drifting off course, or this is to get you back to where you need to be, kind of thing.
Angela Bassett as Amanda Waller.
Yes.
I loved seeing that she was brought into this because, and I hope it's a character because they didn't kill her, so I hope it's a character that they beat her up. But I thought she did a great job. She carried herself like the wall. So I'm hoping that this will be somebody in the DC film universe that we will get to see again. Because I thought that was it was a great choice. They pulled her in a position where you don't normally get to see her. But yet I felt it was totally in character for her to be there.
It's funny. She said in an interview recently that she wants to be the Nick Fury of the DC movies.
I would absolutely love that.
Oh, big time. That'd be, she's a great character. She handled it well. For the Wall, you really need, this strong, confident female who, she's got that presence to her. She's got that X Factor kind of, vibe to her where she's got that strength. And, there's, she can get, if she's getting in a problem, she's going to get herself out of it. And it's, you're not exactly sure how she's going to pull it off. Is it going to be a little bit underhanded? Maybe. Is it going to be above boards? Who knows where she's going to go with it? And that's, for me, is the strength of the character. And she was a great actress to choose for that role. I was really excited when I saw her walking in, because when you're dealing with the Wall, she's a character that when I first got exposed to her, I was really angry with her. And then that's when she was early in the show when I realized that if a character is able to give you an honest, emotional response, that's a good thing. That's a good writer. That's a good art team that really knows how to get that. And she got those reactions out of me. I was legitimately angry at this character. I'm like, oh man, this is a great character. And then from that point on, I always really just enjoyed her. And when any medium uses her, I'm very protective of the character because I want this powerful character.
She played a huge role in a alternate reality game that promoted the movie. I don't know if you guys followed any of that or not, but they used Amanda Waller really well in that.
One of the things that I really liked about her portrayal there is I could see her appearing in multiple films. I would have no issue if we saw her in the next Batman film in some role or capacity as a cameo. It's a character that just, I think, works so well at kind of... She's an opportunist. And always has her own agenda that's kept very close to the cuff. Like, you even feel the role that she's in might not be the whole story every time you see her enter into a scene. And that was something that Angela Bassett, she clearly understood the character and created a great deal of presence immediately when she walked on set. And that's, I mean, as a fan of the character of Amanda Waller, to have gotten that kind of vibe in a role that really was small, I thought was just very well acted. We didn't talk about Martin Jordan, the dad, and talk about the family in general, but I really loved the opening sequence of events where you got to see, Hal getting the jacket from his dad, because it's something I loved that they did in the comics. We got to see that sequence, how, what that jacket means to Hal and all that, and to actually see that play out on the screen I thought was very cool. To see what Dad went through and how much Dad had an influence on Hal's life, and how Hal, being at such a young age, maybe not completely understanding all of the sides of Dad, remembering a certain aspect of him but not remembering all of it. And I think as he gets older in this film, as we see him mature in this film, I think he connects more with his dad towards the end of the film than he even did in the earlier parts of the film, seeing, the responsibilities that Dad had and what he went through, in his situation. But for Hal to see that a sequence of events where Hal's rushing over to his dad, Dad's coming out of the plane, I really liked that moment because you see something that's going to emotionally scar Hal right in that bit. Where you see the daredevil and him realizing that every time he goes up on the plane, it might be his last time. And really this sense of a lack of respect to his own life, as a daredevil, and thinking that's what it's all about. And that wasn't what Dad meant. It wasn't until I think the end of the film that he realized that, yeah, every time I, get in the cockpit or every time I put on the ring, there's a good possibility I might not come back, but that's not why you do it. And that isn't the main point of the whole thing. It's being brave and being courageous for the purpose of accomplishing something. And that there needs to be an A to B in order for that to mean anything. And by the end of the film, we see Hal realizing that A to B is much more important than the possibility you could die. I loved that growth out of the whole thing. And it didn't mean anything if you didn't see what Hal went through as a kid. And to see that growth and how those scars affected him.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of neat how, in the scene between Hal and his nephew, he tries to be like his dad, and he actually uses one of his dad's lines, but he doesn't really understand what that means until later in the movie.
Yeah, that was a nice comparison, and just that again, it showed Hal as this really cool person that when he shows up to the party, his nephew is very upset that he almost died, and he is not even enjoying his own birthday party. And you see Hal just like, yeah, I got this. He's got to make it right, and he's got to, get the kid out there to enjoy his life. And I thought that again, it's a great, portrayal of a person, the humanistic side of Hal Jordan, where he put on the facade of being, hey, it's my job not to be afraid, and just that whole concept. But then you get that little glimmer. He's like, yeah, I hope so. It just where he you see that there is fear inside him. You see there is that that nature to him.
Also seeing what the child was going through, for him to see that objectively and taking a look at his life objectively from the kid's perspective, I thought was something that was well handled, because he had to actually in that moment see, this kid's using me as a role model. And, maybe I need to rethink how I'm presenting myself in these moments. And I really liked seeing him with the kid. I liked how his family reacted. His brothers were reacting differently to him, depending on which brother it was. I liked that the brother, it wasn't just a cookie-cutter response from each brother. One brother was really just kind of, fed up with him, where the other brother was trying to be, which is common in any family relationship. The one brother's fed up because he wants to see more for his brother but doesn't know how to deal with it, and that's very common. But then you have the other brother he's the good brother who's like, okay, I'm going to try to make peace here and try to be encouraging in a situation where I know my other brother's right, but it was such a great role and great character development of a family in a very short sequence. Because that's...
I wish we...
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I just wish we had seen his mother, but nitpick, it's a nitpick. I would have liked to have seen the mother react.
That was a great example of where the film being a little bit longer would have benefited from stuff like that. I don't know, pacing-wise, though, a lot of the things that I wanted to see, I think back and I look at the film and I'm like, well, okay, if we extend it from this, how are we taking too much away then from the main story and the main goal of getting back to that, where it's meant to be a quick character development sequence? I think it's the geek in me that hopes that there was stuff that was cut that's going to be on the DVD release, so I can see some of these sequences again that I would really like to see. But there's a lot that I wanted put in that I know I want put in as a fan, that I don't know necessarily needed to be put back into it. I don't know. I would love to see anything they may have cut and try to figure out why they cut it.
Yeah. Well, and they don't want to get into like the Watchmen situation. If you think about Watchmen the movie, I love the fact that how long it was, but I know for a fact there are people who just the length of the movie itself, prevented them from seeing it. Yeah. And, those who did go say, it went on too long. I'm like, what do you mean it went on too long? It was a great sequences. And I was geeking out over it, but there was a lot of people who the length was the big, anger factor and very annoyance, and it took away from their enjoyment. So I know these comic book movies are very careful with what they're doing.
Well, here's another thing too, though. Actually, you're making a great comparison there, because I loved the Watchmen film. A lot of crabby fans associated with that film. I thought it was very well done. A lot of crabby fans with the Green Lantern film. Yeah. That a lot of people that are saying this film was terrible. Do I think it was the greatest superhero film ever? No. Do I think it was a very, very good superhero film? Absolutely. Like our Plain Dealer, our local paper, gave it a B. I wouldn't give it a B. I'd give it at least a B plus, A minus for myself personally. That's kind of my take on it. That's why I said 4 out of 5. It's in the upper echelon range where I'm like, no, this is a really good film. I want to own this, and I will rewatch it again and again. is it the Donner Superman film? No, but it's definitely in the upper tier of short list of my favorite superhero films, and the outpouring from people who just, I'm like, whoa, boy. I was really shocked at the amount of negative from fans. I'm not talking about from people who don't know Green Lantern. I'm talking about fans who really seem to hate this film. Like, did you see the same film I did? I've nitpicked on this episode things that I found nitpicky on it, but a few, some nitpicks here, some nitpicks there, aren't going to take away from all the stuff that worked in this film so very much.
Yeah, I got a solid emotional reaction from that whole sequence between Hal and Carol when she's like, he's like, to be a Green Lantern, you can't have fear. And I have fear. He's like, no, you have the ability to overcome fear, and that is courage. And I love that scene. I'm sitting there just watching, going, yeah, all right. And I had a geek out moment right there in the audience. As I was watching it unfold, I was like, yes, this is the kind of stuff that I wanted. And it was moments, like you said, moments of greatness. For me, that was just this great moment that I was like, this is something that a non-comic book fan would enjoy.
Well, because it explains at its core roots, and we're for a comic book fan. For me, I love stories that re-explore and re-examine. For me, talk about re-examining because Dio was throwing that out earlier. But re-examine for me what willpower means and what it means to be a lantern. It's overcoming fear. Doesn't mean you can't have fear. Overcoming fear. And that's really a pivotal key point there. Green Lanterns are just as human as the rest of us. They're just as well-rounded. They do have all the emotions that are there. They don't give up fear. They overcome fear. And they're just better at overcoming fear than the rest of us are. That's what makes them key. And I loved that focus in the film. That, to me, is if you don't understand that core when you walk out of a Green Lantern film, then there's a big mistake. And this film delivered that. Is it Tamura Morrison? Abensur? I don't know how to pronounce did I pronounce it right? I don't know if I butchered it or not.
No,
but
I think you did.
Yeah, Abensur. And Myron, I'll go to you first. I personally really enjoyed that we didn't just see Abensur crash on the planet. We got to see what led to that and got to see really a great developed character arc for him in a very short span of time that really made me respect the character and understand why the Lanterns on Oa would look up to him, especially when we saw them looking at Hal later. What did you think about Abensur's development in all this, Myron?
I think it was great that for a change we got to see a little more than just him crash on Earth. You really understood why he was considered the greatest of the great. I mean, he really stood out in terms of an outstanding character, in terms of his ability to fight fear. And they played it up as that he had beaten Parallax before, which I think was a great way to deal with that whole situation of somebody who usually only appears on film for 2 minutes to die and passes the ring on. You don't understand how much weight that ring carries with it until you see it come from a character like Abensur.
Yeah, I like the fact that they explained he had translucent skin. His look, because I always just figured that's okay. That's just the way the alien looks. I'm like, no, he's got clear skin, and that's the muscle fibers underneath that are normally covered by skin. I thought that was a neat little, kind of statement, and they did it. Just it wasn't a big bold thing. It was during the autopsy that Hector was executing as he was explaining, as he's cutting into him and just recording everything. And I don't know. I just something about that. Just like that was neat. That was neat.
Did you think Hector was corrupted by that virus that was in there, or that it just changed him? Because I didn't really take it as corruption as much as I think that the mental abilities going on, what you touched on earlier, Jim, and him recognizing what people were saying around him is really what changed him. Because when he was in his classroom at the school, he really was himself, teaching the kids. But then when he started being able to hear their thoughts, that's what set him over the edge. Did you guys take it the same way I did, or were you taking it that he was corrupted by this? Because I didn't feel the corruption from him in this, other than the power. The ability to hear things that you really shouldn't would ruin relationships and ultimately send you over the edge.
I didn't really think of it as a corruption by the power. It was more of Hector was a kind of a person you push and you pick on and you kind of like smack around somebody so much they're gonna reach their breaking point. They're gonna reach the point where they're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna show you. And in Hector's case, that moment came when he realized the power that he had. And I think it's the power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely, any of those kind of mindsets. And also, what happens to the person who's bullied all the time? Now he's got a chance to fight back, and he was fighting back, and there could have been a little bit of the fear entity, maybe acting, kind of like alcohol, where it just releases, minimizes inhibitions. But in the end, I think it was really just Hector had his chance and he was taking it, and I don't know, he just lost himself in what he was able to do.
Myron, what did you think?
I think that very much similar to what Jim is saying. I think that the abilities that Parallax gave him allowed him to externalize his feelings that he kind of probably kept suppressed, and that if anything, Parallax was probably that little yellow demon on his shoulder saying, yeah, give it to him. But I don't think it was corruption necessarily. I think it was more of this allowed him to really express his frustration and anger that had been probably so suppressed and so bottled up for so long without an outlet, that this was just the letting the genie out of the bottle.
He had Parallax as a little demon on the one shoulder, and then he looks over to the other shoulder, and there's another little demon going, no, I'm with him. Hit him.
Two other characters I want to talk about before we wrap up with this portion of it is Michael Clark Duncan as Kilowog and Jeffrey Rush as Tomar Ray. The Kilowog sequence, we mentioned briefly the training that Hal went through, and I'm in total agreement. I would have loved to have seen more. I do think it was another one of those things where they had to balance, where the story was going overall, that it really was about him defeating Parallax and going in that battle, that I think if we had done that too long, but when he started fighting Kilowog, I thought visually they did a great job of bringing what works from Kilowog to life in a CGI version of him. It was pretty darn close to what I think Kilowog would really look like if it was an actual being, and just captured that. Michael Clark Duncan, how do you get anybody better? Talk about being born to play Kilowog, and really just the lines that were delivered in there, I think fit everything I've seen from Kilowog in the comics. It just was to me such an endearing portrayal of a character. Tomar Ray, seeing him guide Hal, and really how friendly the character was, and how this would be somebody you could see Hal developing a friendship with, and it being just this nice guy who, in the midst of dealing with your Sinestros and your Kilowogs, is accessible. He's the accessible lantern. He's not a trainer. He's just another lantern like Hal, a colleague. And they develop right from the get-go this colleague-like relationship where, he's the good cop dealing with the bad, where the other two guys are the bad cops who are, giving, Hal that kind of relationship there. But I really liked Jeffrey Rush's Tomar Ray, and really how he was giving Hal this sense of being proud to be a lantern, and that this is something that's a special honor, and you should feel good about this. And he was your feel-good moment in the film. Like, I wanted to get a ring on and go flying around with Tomar Ray, because when the two of them when Hal was learning to fly for the first time and he jumped off and you saw the two of them flying together, you could tell Tomar was just smiling when Hal was sharing his excitement over being able to fly, because he gets it. He connected with Hal in those moments, and he was the veteran who, really just understands this guy and wants to tell him, no, this is what you should be feeling. This is part of the job. It's the side of it that the other two aren't going to give you, but I'm going to give you this. And I thought he had an important role in the film, in those sequences. He made me want to be a lantern, in those sequences.
Definitely. I mean, he was like, the wizened old veteran who hasn't lost the wonder or the newness of it either, and sees all that through Hal's eyes and relives that, his own moment, relives it through Hal.
Exactly. That's totally what I got out of that.
And a great introduction of the character as well, when Hal's sitting there, in his costume posing, and he's like, "If you're done admiring yourself," and I was just like, "Yes," because you could, if any one of us got the ring, if any one of us got the power, we we would be doing that. We'd be like, "Oh, look at it, that's cool, and exactly just like pure humanistic moment that Hal has, and he's just sitting there going, "Hey, how you doing?" I was like, "No." Yeah, you mentioned Michael Clark Duncan.
Yeah.
And I tell you, he had the perfect voice for it. You know, you're thinking, because when, you know, with what is Kilowog and just the power behind it, but there is a friendship, and there is, I don't want to say a softer side of him, but there is just a respectful and just understanding, nature to Kilowog. Yes, he's tough, he's brooding, he's the big trainer, but there's been times when he gets to know you and you get to know him that he does let the guard down a little bit, and you see that there is just this cool, good, not so gruff person that you're dealing with. And Michael Clark Duncan has that kind of voice where he has those very powerful moments, but he can rein it back, and it's still the same person. And that was just a wonderful casting on their part.
That sequence that led from that into the fight with Sinestro, as far as the training match between the two of them, how Sinestro took that over because he clearly saw something in Hal, but also his relationship with Abin Sur is something where he felt a need to really push this Lantern to see if he deserved the ring that he was wearing. And I love the cockiness of it, but being able to back it up. Like, Sinestro was there in the fight, pulled up 2 swords. Like, Hal was thinking 1 sword, Sinestro pulled out 2.
Yeah.
And it was clearly every time that Hal did a construct, Sinestro was one-upping him with the constructs. But really pushing Hal, there was a lesson to be taught in there, too, because he was talking all the way through it and really explaining to Hal what Hal was doing wrong, how Hal wasn't quite thinking beyond it. And I think having a pivotal impact on what Hal was able to do with Parallax at the end. I think that fight with Sinestro, you could look back at it and say, wow, Hal really learned something from this that drove him in the end in that final battle. And we got to see him use different constructs post that fight in a way that we didn't get to see prior to that.
Well, he was doing some nice scrambling and some improvised.
Sure.
Throwing the gas truck and then creating the big guns and boom,
Right.
and just this kept mixing things up and just not being a one trick pony. I thought that was just again showing the evolution and growth of Hal Jordan.
But a lot of that was directly driven from Sinestro, and Mark Strong was brilliant as that character. One of my hopes for a sequel to this, and I hope we get one, because I'm so worried about the sales numbers for this one. And I do encourage people, if you liked it, please see it again, just because this movie needs to do more at the box office, because I want to see a sequel. Because it cost a lot to make this because of all the visual on it, and I think it is a great film that's worthy of a sequel. I think that, I think we're going to see it. It's, like I said, very good in the beginning with moments of greatness. I'll stand by that. But I think that there's a good possibility that seeing the direction this is going to go in with the sequel will add something to this film, if that makes sense. A lot of my nitpicks are things that can be expanded upon in a second film where it will actually change my viewpoint of the first. And because it's clear this film was crafted with in mind the sequel. Because they already green-lighted the sequel while this was in development. So this was totally crafted with, the next film being in mind and seeing a Sinestro Corps battle. So
yeah. When they pitched this movie, they pitched it as a trilogy.
Right.
And yeah, you're right. They're already working on a second one. We just hope the box office, supports it. Right now, it's made domestically about $67 million. So it's got a ways to go to break even. But I'm hoping that Warner Brothers sees the fact that a lot of the money they spent for this first one in terms of developing the character models and all that groundwork has already been done, and it's got to make the cost of a second one a little bit cheaper.
It's kind of like, going to be with the Star Trek movies, where when that first Star Trek the Motion Picture came out, everyone's like, oh, then Wrath of Khan 2 came out, and everyone's like, yay! So I think we're going to get kind of a very similar reaction, where I think some of the people who are very negative about the movie, when the second one comes out, and it is the Sinestro, if it is the Sinestro Corps War, I think we're going to get a little bit more people saying, "Ooh, I got to see this. This should be," because some of the more action, more fight sequences, more ring slinging, and just everything playing out. Plus, who knows who else from Earth? We may get another, one of the, Guy or Kyle or John or any of the other, interactions.
Yeah, I don't know that I don't know if they're going to go too crazy into the other Earth Green Lanterns, and I don't know that necessarily, depending on the story, that would be a good route to go, just because I think there's so much character development left to do with Hal that there's a danger in a trilogy of kind of, because we've all said it in this, they were trying to do a lot in this film, and I think that hurt a few different things they were doing. And it hurt's a strong word. There were things where I was just kind of like, they would have been great. They just wound up being very good because there wasn't enough time. Myron's comment about having another 25 minutes on this film, I think, would have benefited greatly. But then they go back to what you're saying about it being too long, Watchmen-ish. I think we would have liked it. I don't know that it would have worked for other people.
The normal people.
I don't normally agree with our Plain Dealer reviews a lot of time when it comes to sci-fi. I really agreed with the review on this one. They commented on how this is a great introductory film, clearly leading to the second film. And they gave it a B because of that. They said, great film to see as an introduction to all this. Plan on, kind of like it's very common to see this part 1 and part 2 films now, where they're divided up. Very clear that this was developed with that purpose, and it worked. And I was thrilled to see them embracing that versus making that, because that was actually a strong comment on their end, where normally when they say that, they usually mean it backhanded, and it was a great review on this, and it was cool to see the Plain Dealer embracing a little bit more of the superhero genre films, which they haven't done I'm talking about the past since our childhood. I know you and I, anytime we've read Plain Dealer reviews, it's typically our films that we like are getting ripped apart.
I still hold on to the fact that the Plain Dealer, was one of the people who ripped on Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, what? That was my falling out with the movie review guy when he ripped on the Indiana Jones. I was like, how can you not?
About
like
Raiders?
That?
Yeah. Which to me, that was kind of my falling out too. But I was great to see that happening with this film. I don't know. I'm very anxious for a sequel after this, and I think that's a sign of a good film. At the end, I'll say 4 out of 5 on this one. One of the things that I'll actually give this one a 4.5 out of 5 for this part. This would actually give me a half point. One of the first films I remember in a while seeing any reference at the end in the credits to buying the comic books. It was just that static image that we've seen in the comics with Ryan Reynolds and then a couple of trades surrounding him. I was so glad at the end, like the film, buy some comics. Very quick thing. It's been something I've been asking for a long time. I think it should be in every film where there's comic book source material, or any where the source material is a novel, the source material is anything. It doesn't have to be just comic books. There should be some reference to the fact that you can buy. Wizard of Oz should have a thing at the end. Buy Baum's books. I really think that that's really important when there's source material to say, hey, go, if you like this, go enjoy where it came from. And I was glad to see just a quick reference. That's all I'm asking for in there. Would I have liked it earlier in the film, like in the beginning? Sure, but I get that that's kind of a weird placement for an ad. It was great to see it in the credits at the end, and I applaud them for that. That was great. And it does, it takes a film that was 4 out of 5. It gave me a little extra credit boost on that one because I really liked seeing that. Because that's all I've ever asked for, is just some kind of acknowledgement that, hey, this came from comic book material. And instead of just having a little tiny text blurb that nobody can barely read, a big splash of, hey, look, there's Ryan Reynolds, and here's some comic book trades around him. That was cool. Visual styling on this, I do want to comment on one thing. I loved his costume in this, which when I first saw it, way back when, with the kind of energy thing going on, and I was kind of like, oh, I don't know how I feel about this one. It grew on me over time. Seeing it in practice in this really made me like it that much more because you saw the energy coursing through it when he powered up. And as his ring was powering down when he needed to recharge, you saw less of that energy going through it. So it really added this sense of, and the material-wise, they showed in the film that it was definitely a construct. Even when he first put it on and he was feeling the material and you saw the way it was malleable, I really liked that in this. That the explanation was that the costume crafts itself to the background and race and culture of the wearer. Loved every bit of that. It worked for me on the screen in a way that it didn't when it was just static images early on. And that was something I was glad to see changed for me in this. I was never like, ooh, Hal's costume really stinks. I was totally captivated by that aspect of it throughout. And the Sinestro one, like I said, at the end.
That was just a great boom pop.
Yeah, and I was like, woof. Which I think, honestly, was the best-looking costume in the whole film. The Sinestro Corps one.
Yeah.
Because when I saw that, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like right out of the comic.
Yeah, that definitely had a nice, sudden, oh my god kind of moment. Yeah. And it's funny, his lantern when I first saw images of it, I was like, I don't know, but by the end of the movie, I kind of liked it. I liked a little bit different that it did have this alien crafted look to it.
I want one.
Yeah.
I do. Well, I mean, like, there's props of it now. I had no interest in any of that stuff. Now that I've seen the film and actually seen it in practice, I'm with you in the sense that the film turned me around on it, because I didn't like the design either. I wanted something a little bit more with the handle like we're used to seeing with the traditional lantern. Seeing it in the film, like, oh, wow, I so totally get this now. It worked.
I think it's one of those cases where when you see a publicity still or any still image, you don't really get an idea of how it's going to play out when it's moving. And when you go back and look at the Entertainment Weekly cover and that first trailer back from last November, the costume really didn't look as good as it does now. And that was because the effects were still pretty early on at that point. But boy, once you see it alive and moving on the screen and you see the lantern and why it looks so alien, it just looks much more impressive than would have been the comic book faithful Railroad Lantern.
Any hopes for the second that you guys have that we haven't really voiced? And I know we talked about, we've all mentioned certain things throughout this that we'd like to see in the second one. Is there anything that you're like, wow, I'd like to see this in the second, we haven't really mentioned it yet? Myron, do you have anything that's standing out?
I just think we need to spend more time in space, and on Oa in particular, with more of the core. I think one of the things that fans have an issue with this movie is they thought once they saw that WonderCon footage that it was going to be one of these sprawling space epics with a lot of battles in space, with a lot more emphasis on the core. And initially it was said that the battle with Parallax was going to go to Oa, and there was going to be a climactic battle between the core and Parallax. And we didn't see that, and that might be where some of the letdown comes from. I think if we go into a second one, I'd love to see a lot more time in space and less time on Earth, to be honest.
And I agree completely with your sentiments. I want to see kind of, especially if they're introducing a Sinestro Corps war, I want to see those on the different planets, and maybe just even you have another, couple Green Lanterns, couple Yellow Lanterns duking it out, Hal in the mix or Hal not in the mix, and just kind of a nice variety of, changing this, a definite change of scenery. It's an intergalactic police force. I want to see them affecting other places. The other thing that I would like to see onto this is either a reference or mentioning of other superheroes. They don't have to show Superman or show Batman, just a referencing to that there are other heroes in this universe. Because right now we don't have any reference that there's anybody other than Green Lantern.
Well, then comes the question, why wouldn't he call them? That always, you run into a serious issue there as to why. Like in this, it established, and one of the things I really liked about this, because I've read that criticism too, about how it didn't go to Oa and had this big sprawling battle. First of all, the story's about Hal Jordan in this one, and it's really developing like why he's the greatest Green Lantern. If you've got all the other lanterns there and you're having this epic space battle, at what point in time do we establish how good Hal really is and why he's good? And you need to see this moment where they develop respect for him. At the end, when the lanterns come to him, because Hal shied them off, initially, he just said, I'm done with you. I'm not right for this. He wasn't like, he was really saying, this is not for me. I'm not your guy. And he left and went back to Earth. Then he came to them and asked them for help, saying, don't ignore Earth. Humans got a lot to offer. I loved that whole sequence of events with him pleading with them. And they had a good reason as far as why they were staying out of it. Because they were really analyzing the situation, which is what we've seen from the Guardians.
Yeah.
And, at the end, we saw the other Lanterns come to Hal's rescue where Hal almost died, and that was perfect placement. But we had that great Hal moment where we got to see why he is this greatest Green Lantern that we've always known him to be in the comics. And you need that established in the beginning. Now, in the sequel, you've already established all that in the first film.
Right.
You can do the space cop stuff that you guys are mentioning, because we've established now who Hal is and why he's so good. You don't need to do that in the second. You need to establish why these other guys are so good and why they buddy up together and what makes them great. And you can really do that using Hal as your baseline now, because we've established a very high baseline for him. I don't want to poo-poo your comment before, Jim, about other superheroes. I like that idea too, and with them creating this Justice League universe in there, I don't have an issue with that. It's something that they have to do carefully when they do it. And if they do it, explain why maybe he's had some dealings with them, he's met them, but, maybe he doesn't have a relationship with them yet or something. I know there's this guy or that guy, but, I don't know what side they're on because they're vigilantes. Are they one? I like when they do references to stuff like that, and I'm not against it. My problem in this film, we go back to what we've all said. I don't think they could have added anything else into this one, but in a sequel, maybe there'd be an opportunity to do that. If it takes place on Oa, I don't know that there will be that opportunity, and I don't want it shoved in there for no reason.
And it could even be something as simple as, just a news story in the background. Mm-hmm. Hal is talking to Carol, and as he's about to leave for Oa, there's a reference of, up in the air, look up in the sky, or there's a Gotham reference of a vigilante strikes again in Gotham. Just a little boom like that. Nothing, as I said, they don't need to have the Justice League yet. Just start putting the seeds out there that there's other heroes in the world. Every DC movie has it where they don't reference to the outside world. They don't make mention of other heroes being around. And I wish they would, just acknowledge that there's other people out there.
Is there an animated series still going on in the fall? Because I think that's still a go.
Yeah, it's still a go. Bruce Timm is producing it. I don't know if it's going to debut in the fall. They're talking 2012.
Okay.
There may be how Young Justice had a preview movie in November, and it actually was the first 3 episodes pinned together into a short film. They may still be doing that. I haven't heard.
See, to me, I like those preview films, but I always feel a lot of times when you do a preview film and then you put that much distance between that and the main series, you'll lose people a lot of times because there's no follow-up right away. I think a preview film's a great idea, and then you launch into the series. So, if they're going to do that, you might as well save the preview film for 2012 as well, and just kind of go, wow, look at this. We're going to hit you heavy with this, and then you can follow the adventures afterwards. I do know from what I've read on that series, it isn't going to focus on the other heroes in the DC universe. It is going to be all Green Lantern focused. We're going to see Hal Jordan. We're going to see Kilowog. All the main players. Carol is going to be in it, and it is going to be Hal Jordan and Green Lantern universe focused. So I think it's not to confuse people with there being other cartoon series and stuff, but I think it's supposed to be part of that. They're creating some kind of DC lineup, Warner Brothers DC lineup of animated series, and though it's supposed to be part of that, and I'm very anxious to see that. I'm going to say one of the things I'm anxious to see in that is not just the space opera stuff, but I actually, and it's something I want to see in the comics sometimes, the Green Lanterns too, Earth-based stuff. I like seeing Green Lantern set on Earth. Not just, and don't get me wrong, I'm a space opera junkie. I love Flash Gordon. It's one of those characters that I've really dug. Buck Rogers. I'm into all that kind of stuff. So when they do it in Green Lantern and do it well, Rebels, all that stuff worked very well for me. So I'm into all that. But one of the things I like about Green Lantern is the duality of being able to do great Earth-based superhero stories too. I want to see some of that. Not necessarily, I don't mean in the second film. I'd like to see that in the animated series, though, where you kind of explore how this character can work and interact on Earth, even more so than what we saw in this one. Because this one really was like a mixture of Earth-based space opera because of Parallax and how that all came about and using Oa. I would like to see a total episode of the Green Lantern cartoon set on Earth, start to finish, with real villains from Earth, that type of basis.
And every time you keep saying space opera, I keep popping in my head, Flash, ah!
Well, I'm going back more to Buster Crab, but I like the old, I remember we had a restaurant around here called the Ground Round where you threw the peanut shells on the floor and stuff like that, but they always ran old serials, including the old original Batman, Black and White, Superman, Buck Rogers, but the one I really was captivated by, which is probably odd seeing as a Batman junkie, that was my first exposure as a kid to the Flash Gordon serials by Buster Crabbe. And one of the things that always irritated me about the Ground Round is they had some weird music playing in the background. You never got the vocals.
Yeah, you just got the visual stuff.
So, you're trying to figure out what's going on and all this. I finally, as I got older, I sought them out and got to see the whole thing. So, really good stuff. And a lot of that, at its core, translates very well today in great space opera, which you can do in Green Lantern very well. So I love space opera, and I want to see more of that, but I also want to see Earth-based, because I do think Green Lantern's lent itself over the years to some wonderful Earth-based superhero storytelling, and I'd like to see that in the animated series. More so in the next film, I want to see Sinestro Corps. Yeah. So I'm not going to argue in any way, shape, or form. Yes, we want big, blazing space opera in the next film. I want to see that as well. Great film, though. I'm thrilled that this came out, and I really enjoyed it. Wound up sticking with my very good with great moments, but so much to geek out over in this one.
One quick thing, just want to get a final idea. See what you guys both think of this. It's
terrible.
If we do get, if we do get the Sinestro Corps War, if we do get that big epic battle, what would you think about Sinestro actually bringing the fight to Earth? And we get, if you think about that moments in the Sinestro Corps War where Sinestro did that, and they went to Coast City, and Coast City became the city without fear, where they're hanging the green in the window, and everyone's just like knuckling up behind Green Lantern. Having that type of epic battle going on we've already seen something similar in the first movie. Would you want to see something else like that?
Go ahead, Myron.
I don't know. I don't know as if they've established enough about Coast City and his family to make that moment feel as powerful as it was in the comics. So I'm not sure if I'd want to see it or not.
I was Myron and I are in similar places in the sense that I actually will say I would want to see it if they somehow established in an establishing segment in the beginning. It can be very quick. That Coast City at this point, like, time has passed. Green Lantern's been a hero in Coast City. He's done a bunch of things, through newspaper ads, newsreel. There's times where they do montages in films to show that there's been some longevity and a whole bunch of stuff we're not going to see on screen. But look at all these cool things Green Lantern did. They do that in the beginning and really establish that Coast City's behind this guy. You see people wearing Green Lantern T-shirts, and the kids are all fans and all that kind of stuff. You can get away with that.
Yeah.
You have to establish that at the beginning. So if they don't establish that, though, I'm with Myron. I don't think there's a point. You've got to really establish, because otherwise you don't care. But if you establish this city knows him, they know what he's all about. This is not the same Hal that we saw in this one, who was unsure of himself. He's the guy that ended the film, and he's done a whole bunch since the end of that film to the start of the other one to really establish himself. Some of those earthbound villains that I was talking about, we see quick blurbs that he beat this guy, he beat that guy, he beat this guy. Teamed up with these heroes, touching on what you said. Hal Jordan and Green Lantern and Green Arrow team up and fight, against these two characters, something like that. Do those kind of cool little quick blurbs. And then you flash to this moment where it's him versus Sinestro Corps coming to Earth. I would be all cool with that.
Yeah, I could see a scene where, it opens up the movie and you pan past the Welcome to Coast City sign and it says Home of Green Lantern and there's something going on. Just enough to establish that. Then you could definitely get away with it.
And him saving, maybe at the beginning, or opening action sequence is not only that montage I was mentioning, but it's him fighting some big bad on Earth. And wrapping that up, and the people kind of swarming around him, and just seeing that there's a genuine love for him there. You do that, and that would work. I don't know if you need to do that, but that's what I would need for that to work for me. So, yeah, I would like to see it if done right, but I don't know if they're going to go that route. Cool film.
Oh no, you don't!
Hey, Sean and Jim, Donnie Salvo here. I just wanted to give a couple of thoughts about the DC relaunch, I guess you could call it. At first, I was quite upset. I was. It was like somebody just killed my best friend, but I got over it. One of the reasons being I was kind of upset was, for me, I've been loving the Bat books. Every single Bat book, man, has been... what Morrison did with that entire universe, and Brian Q. Miller, and Fabian Nicieza, everybody involved with the Bat books. They've been the best they've been in years, and I'm just kind of nervous because I think all of that's going away, or half of it's going away, or I'm not really sure. But another thing is that really attracted me to DC Comics back when I was a kid was the legacy of it all, where you had all the stories with the All-Star Squadron and, the JSA. And it was the whole legacy aspect. These heroes came together to stand up against, the oppression of World War II, and from that generation spawned a whole new generation, and then that generation spawned a whole new generation. And I just see that, like, I was just kind of saddened with the relaunch and the 52 titles that are coming out, that there's really no mention. Not to say that they erased any of that stuff. I'm just saying that, like, for now, there's no mention of any of that, And I don't know, that kind of bugs me, I guess. But there are a lot of interesting titles coming up that I'm going to try out. I'm not going to go through them all. It's only like a 3-minute call, so I don't want to go crazy. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting titles there. I haven't been really familiar with the Wildstorm universe, and for a chance for me to get these characters reintroduced to me, that's kind of cool. A lot of people probably don't really care, but one way or the other. But I'll give them a shot. But all right, guys, thanks for letting me babble for a few minutes, and as always, I enjoy the show. Look forward to seeing you next time, probably New York, possibly. Anyway, later, guys.
Yeah, the relaunch has been one of those tricky things for me, too, because, like you, there's a lot of titles that I like that are being put on the chopping block and are not going to be back. You talk about legacy characters like JSA and stuff like the Power Girl. We don't see those characters making appearances in the relaunches. Now, that being said, there are legacy characters, and Batman's legacy looks like it's pretty much intact. There might be some tweaks and things to there, but it looks like there's going to be multiple Robin. Damian is going to be Robin in the future, which means that there will have been a Robin progression there. What it looks like for Tim Drake, but Tim Drake was a previous Robin. That was already announced in the Titans blurb. So I don't know how much of that progression is going to be there. Jason Todd's going to be Red Hood. Dick Grayson's going back to being Nightwing, but it looks like it's going to be him going back to Nightwing after being Batman. So it doesn't look like we're losing a lot of the progression in the Bat books that you've been enjoying. My real question mark is on the Batgirl part of it, because I've really loved Stephanie Brown. Now, I'm thrilled to death that Gail Simone's going to be writing Barbara Gordon as Batgirl. Now, does that mean that it's going to be Batgirl never having been in the wheelchair? I don't know. I don't know what that's going to be. I'm willing to give that a shot. I'm not against the way that they're doing some of this now, because it looks like they're trying to do a balance of relaunching things and new and exciting things, while at the same time acknowledging their legacy. They're trying to do a hybrid versus doing everything. So am I assuming there's a good possibility that Barbara Gordon Batgirl is going to be never have been in the wheelchair? Probably. But, there's also that possibility that the storyline is somehow going to weave into this. A lot of the ending of Flashpoint is going to make it clear what's really going on here, I think. So I don't know. I'm very tentative on a wait and see. The more the announcements that we're getting, though, and the more actual solicits and blurbs and things, I'm getting more excited. I'm very disappointed there's no Secret Six. It's one of my top 5 favorite books. Honestly, between that and Birds of Prey, written by Gail Simone, those two books have been my 1 and 2 top books every month. So those books are going to be changing. So, Secret Six is not going to be there at all. And we're not going to have the Birds of Prey that we're used to. There's going to be a Birds of Prey, and I'm willing to give that book a shot. I want to see what the new writer's going to do with the new direction and everything, because I love those characters. But talk about the great development that's gone on with them. I don't see any Huntress in this future right now. And there's a character who I adore, Lady Blackhawk. That core group that's been in Birds of Prey are some of my favorite characters. So I share some of your reservations. Yet, there's titles like Fury of Firestorm. Very excited about that. Captain Atom looks phenomenal. I'm really excited about that. The Justice League relaunch, I'm looking forward to that. I've been digging Justice League. I've mentioned on the show many times what James Robinson's been doing. I've been thinking is terrific. You can't argue with that lineup, though, of Jeff Johns and Jim Lee writing, a new reimagining of how the Justice League came together. And it looks like that younger team that we're seeing there is going to be showing us what it was like when they came together, a reimagining of how they came together, and then we're going to get a present-day version of that team. So what that's going to look like, I have absolutely no idea. So I don't know. I don't know. There's a lot of question marks that I have. You mentioned a number of creators in there. A lot of the creators you were mentioning from the Bat Books are sticking around. So that's good news, because these are the people that we've been enjoying their work, and they've been delivering month in, month out. So that's something to get excited about. I feel a lot of your pain. I feel a lot of the excitement too on the other side. So I'm very much in the middle, because I've gone through relaunches before with characters, and a lot of them have paid off, where I was loving what was going on before, but then the relaunch kicked it up to 11 or 12 or 13 or whatever. So I don't know. I don't know, Dottie. I think we're all in that boat right now. I was with you in the beginning when they first announced all this. My jaw dropped, and I was really worried. Now, the more information that comes out, and that's something smart that they've been doing. They've been taking advantage of releasing more and more information once they announced it, to kind of put people's minds at ease on what they're doing. We just talked in the last segment about Superman, and we went off on that little tangent because that's a title that that has me concerned. Now, it has me concerned, but it could wind up being some amazing Superman storytelling. So there's that possibility too. For all these things that we're all worried about, what happens if it's all great? Or if a lot of it's great, or most of it's great, whatever. What happens if titles go into directions that we didn't expect? So some of the things that are missing really bug me. But some of the possibilities in some of these new titles really have me interested. So we'll see. We'll see what they do. Who knows what kind of conversation we're going to have in September. Could be, wow, look what they did. What were they thinking? Or it could be, wow, this is amazing. We didn't think it could get better, but it did. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. Thanks for the call, buddy.
Hi, Sean and Jim. This is Charlie from Alternate Reality. And I was calling in to leave some thoughts on the Green Lantern movie that just came out, starring Ryan Reynolds. And I just wanted to let you all know I thought the movie was really good. I just watched it again today for the second time after had watched it on Sunday. Today being Wednesday, sorry. I thought it was really good. I thought there was a lot of things weren't said, like Krona being the main bad guy, but it had to be him because he was like the only one not in the council chamber, even though they showed his like destroyed chair, which I love. I also like the fact that they like all the Green Lanterns in the background, you could see like Steel or Stell, however you want to call him, there is Buzz. And I think you could see Boudica in one of the things. And on the second part, you can actually see, like, I think, Medfill. I think he's one of the Lanterns, too. It'd have been nice to have seen, like, Mogo. That'd have been a nice touch, but they'd had to have explained who he was. My biggest problem though with the movie was that I thought that Hector Hammond was in it a little too much. I mean, watching it the second time, his scenes kind of dragged. I mean, they showed him in the first part and like, okay, we got it. He's creepy and weird. Let's move on with it, I thought Mark Strong was really good as Sinestro. And spoilers, stay after the main, like the artsy credits, and you get a scene with him in it. And afterwards, you get a ad for reading DC Comics if you stay till the whole end credits, which I don't think a lot of people will. So that might have been a missed opportunity for them. It was kind of cool, like, also, like, oh, crap. Don't want to take up too much time. But Clancy Brown as Parallax, the voice of Parallax, which was kind of neat, him being Lex Luthor and all the animated cartoons and stuff. But like I said, I really enjoyed the movie. I thought it was a little short, but the stuff with Hector Hammond made it seem a little longer than it should have been. But that's all I wanted to say. Good movie. Hope everyone gets to check it out. Go in it just like you're going to watch a movie. Like, don't go in it with like any heavy expectations. It's kind of an origin. So that's all I need to say. Bye, guys. Great show. See ya.
This is a great example of why I love podcasting, because I was saying on the segment before that I wanted to see more with Hector Hammond. See them go to, and it's funny how Charlie came from a different standpoint. And there's no right or wrong answer to there. That's one of the, like I said, that's one of the things I love about voicemails is you just get a different take on the whole film. I was glad you stayed too, and you noticed the whole comic ad in there. I thought that was a neat touch. I know, like you said, it's very late in the credits, but to me, I've always been disappointed that that's not really ever prominently displayed anywhere. So I thought it was a step in the right direction, and I'm hoping that we see more of that. I don't know where is good places to put those in the films, but at least have it somewhere. And I think that's something that should be an essential on DVD extras or Blu-ray extras, would be some digital versions of comics on there that people can read on their television screens. I think this is a step in the right direction, though, and yay, I applaud them for it. At least it was somewhere. And you're right, that geek out moment with Mark Strong was fantastic. I would have liked to have seen, like you said, Mogo and characters like that, too. I think they tried to do so much in this film, and I really am with you. I think it delivered, and I would tell people, you were saying that don't set your or don't go in with like those heavy expectations. I think it is important with any film to go in like with kind of a blank slate and make your own judgment versus going in with other people's judgments already in your head. Because I know a lot of people were walking in already angry about the film because of reviews that they read. And I think that's a tough way to go into a film. I try to go in open-minded. I try not to read stuff before I go to films. It's hard not to, and it's hard not to listen to podcasts or do things like that before you go to films. I do it, I listen to a lot of my favorite shows, because of that purpose. And then, we don't all agree always on what we like and what we don't like, and that's part of the fun of all this. But it was a good film, really good film. And I'm hoping that we get this sequel out of it because, it's a great launch, like you said, origin story for a trilogy. And I hope we get the full trilogy because I think as fans, that's when you can really judge this, is when you see how the trilogy pays off. Because there's been some great trilogies out there. And so let's see how this one holds up. But I'm very satisfied. I saw it twice. I'm actually contemplating seeing it again. And 3D is pretty expensive. So to have gone to see it twice in 3D and want to go see it again, says a lot about the film. That I'd like to see it on the big screen again before I actually purchase it, because this is a must buy for me. And that right there says it. Movies. I'll give you a great example. Jonah Hex was a movie I enjoyed. We did an episode on it, but I don't own it. Green Lantern, I will definitely own. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind. I'm a lot pickier on what I own film-wise now than I used to be. And, it really is my sense of rewatchability is what decides what I'm going to buy and what I'm not going to. And this is going to be a rewatchable movie. This is going to be one of those where I'm going to want to see it again. I'm going to get in a Green Lantern mood. I'm going to throw this in and want to just delve into the whole experience. And that to me was it a good movie or a bad movie? It's a good movie if I want to rewatch it again and again. That says a lot. So thanks a lot. One other thing I want to mention is I was on the Earth Station 1 podcast, and we did a Doctor Who episode. It was episode 64 of their show. And I've got this in the show notes. It's ERTHstation1.wordpress.com. So take the A out of Earth, and it's earthstation1.wordpress.com. And this is right in the show notes, which will be on our website as well. And I really had a great time. It was a nice roundtable discussion, and I would gladly, do their show again. I don't get as much opportunity to guests on podcasts as I'd like to because, I'm putting out a 4-a-month podcast myself. So when I have those opportunities to guest on other programs, it's really just fun for me to just be there and be a guest and kind of delve into different topics. And Doctor Who is a great passion of mine. As passionate as I am for DC Comics, I'm also, since my childhood, have been very passionate for Doctor Who. So anybody who's a Doctor Who fan out there that's interested, it's Earth Station 1, episode 64. We talk about the finale, the mid-season finale of this current run. And it was just a great group of guys and just a great time to be there. So I definitely recommend listening to it, and there's links right in the show notes to their website. And it's episode 64 of their show. So thanks again for inviting me on. I really had a good time.
Hey guys, this is Chad Burdett. Just calling to leave you some thoughts on the Green Lantern movie. When I first saw that it was coming out, I really tried to, I wouldn't say lower my expectations, but I did avoid watching any trailers or any spoilers about the film. And when I saw it on Monday, I guess I was pleasantly surprised. There were a few points in the movie where there was some awkward dialogue or some scenes that really didn't work for me. I thought that there should have possibly been some more development of how to begin with on Earth before getting the ring, or possibly incorporating the backstory of the Corps into the movie, and we as the viewer learned it as Hal learns it. Also kind of missed, or would have liked to have seen, like a scene where the ring is going out looking for the replacement, and it maybe flies through a locker room or a bar, and there we get a cameo of Guy Gardner. And I know it's not in the original origin, but maybe the ring would also fly near a building, and you would see Jon Stewart sitting at a drafting table or something like that before the ring finally finds Hal. I think that there's a lot of possibility if they were to do a sequel to this, perhaps focus more on the Hal Jordan Sinestro relationship, and Sinestro becoming bad, and Hal finding out how he runs his home planet, things like that. If they do continue with the series. Another point I'd like to make is in the closing credits, at the very end of the credits, they had the scene with the pictures of the comic books that people should check out, and I think that scene would have, or that would have looked or worked better in the beginning parts of the credits, where they had and replaced the scene where it just said, follow the adventures of the Green Lantern through DC Comics. And that would just, in my opinion, have been a better way to try to drum up more readers, especially with the DC Universe relaunch coming in September. Anyway, can't wait to hear what you guys thought of the film, and I'll catch you later. Bye.
It was funny. I walked into the film. I did look at all the trailers, and I looked at all the promo pieces and all that stuff. And I love that about films. It does get me excited for the films. And I will say, the more promotional material they released for this one, I'm talking about promotional material, not spoilers, big difference. The trailers and things like that they did, it got me more excited for the film. So I will say that their promotion worked for me. I know for some people it didn't, and that's quite all right. But it did for me, and that was quite an interesting thing, because when I went to the midnight show, and it wasn't, I don't do that as much anymore as I used to. And this is when I wanted to go to the midnight show. I was excited to go to the midnight show. I had to the point where I couldn't sleep before the midnight show, which I normally like to take a little nap or something so I can make it through it without, the head bobbing and all that stuff. And I couldn't for this one because I was so anticipating it. So this was a film that the promotional pieces, I walked in excited. So I wasn't, walking in tentative or anything like that. And the reaction that I have on the show is based on walking in with a sense of real excitement about seeing Green Lantern on the big screen. So it was interesting. When you talked about comics at the end and where they could have put that, it's very expensive to put those things into film. And I know our friend Mike, who's the father of Nathan, has mentioned on the show a couple of times just, how expensive it is to do those kinds of things into film and along with film promotion. I was glad to see it there at all. I think it's a step in the right direction. It shows that the company, DC Entertainment, is thinking in a different way and really trying to kind of put some promotion into their products. So I'm curious to see when this is released on DVD and Blu-ray, what that looks like. Are we going to get some kind of ads on there? Because that's somewhere where you have a bigger opportunity and extras to talk more about the comics. And they are doing, I will say this, on their direct-to-DVD releases and on things like Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, in the extras, they are putting on pieces that talk about the comic book links to this work. So they are starting to do that more. And I got to say, I don't give them enough credit for that, because I'm always clamoring for it and saying, boy, they should do more of this. And they really are in the extras. It's harder to do in the main film. And I'm with you. I would have liked to have seen it a little earlier in the credits. So, I'm not disputing you. We're really in sync on that. But I was glad to see it there at all. I just think that to me is a step in the right direction. So, I hope they continue to work on that and find clever ways to put that in there. As far as cameos go, I'm with you. I would have loved to see more of that. I'm cautious on that just because I felt one of my tiny issues with the film is I thought they were trying to do too much. And I think a lot of it was great. But there were some things that I think because they were trying to do so much that didn't get put in or didn't get done kind of the way I would have liked to have seen it done. So I'd like to see the next film continue with what they've started here and maybe fleshing out some of the things they started to develop here. And that would be kind of my wish list for this. There's so many things that I would like to see in a Green Lantern film. And the great part about if they do get to do a trilogy with this, and I'm hoping it's successful enough that they do, is they'll have a chance to flesh out some of these things and do some of the cameos you're mentioning. Because there's a lot more space to do that then. So, I don't know. We'll see what comes of all this. But thanks for the phone call. And our show voicemail line is 1-440-388-4434. Or Dr. Norge on Skype. And that's always in our show notes and up on the website. We love having you participate, so please feel free to call in any of our topics. I am starting to Twitter when we finalize topics for episodes. I'm starting to Twitter about them, and so that way hey, we're going to be talking about this week, and if you want to get in some voicemails. But you're always welcome to follow up on our show episodes too, so don't feel like, well, geez, they talked about that last week, and so I can't really get into voicemail now. If you listen to this Green Lantern episode, we talk about this and Emerald Knights, and you want to throw your thoughts in on it, please feel free to call in and continue the discussion, and I'll put them all on future episodes. I do air every voicemail we get, so feel free to add your voice, and we'd love to have you part of the show.
You won't get away from me this time, Buster.
It's funny, we're going to start talking about Emerald Knights, but Myron, just in passing, made an interesting comment. Myron, could you start with that, actually, real quick?
Sure. One of the controversies, one of the criticisms leveled at the film has been the editing. And one of the controversies that I've been hearing about over the last few days is that somebody in New Orleans where the film was shot saw the shooting script and said that there were a lot of things shot that didn't end up in the film, and that people from Warner Brothers, some of the higher-ups, got involved in the editing of the film, and that the film we see in the theater is not Martin Campbell's cut of the film. Now, how much accuracy there is there, I don't know. I do know that whole opening sequence where Tomar Ray kind of gives you the history of the Corps and Parallax, that was added to the film after the cut was turned in. So the thinking has been that things were cut out of the film to make room for that. Now, no one knows how much truth there is to any of this, but that could explain why some of the cuts in the film don't make some sense, or some things don't transition as well, is because some things may have been cut out by the studio.
Well, and like you said, it's a rumor, so we'll respond to it like any rumor. We're like, let's talk about our feelings on it, but it's a rumor. I find it interesting, though, because first of all, if they made a decision to cut anything out of the film, I'm of the mind with the cost of films nowadays, especially the cost of a 3D film, I'm talking about to go to it, I'm always looking for more value. So I'm not a fan of cutting scenes out that make sense to keep in the film. Now, I don't know that they did this. So, I mean, this is, again, speculation as far as if this is true, did they do that? I know that there's some people that might, oh, that just is too long of a film to go to. I'm like, are you paying for the same movie tickets that I am now? No, give me more.
It didn't hurt Lord of the Rings.
No, not at well. And see, how do you argue on the value of those films? I mean, you get a lot of value in a good story. And I don't, honestly, they released the special editions, which are longer, and I think those are better films than the ones that were originally released, the theatrical versions. So I would love, if there were sequences, let's go on to the theory, if there's any truth to this at all, no matter how small, I would love to see, again, the sequences that may have been cut to do this, if there were. And that's a big if at this moment. But I would love to see a quote-unquote director's cut of the film released with keeping in that opening sequence, because I thought it was good, and whatever may have been taken out to make room for that.
And it's... with me, if one of the things that does kind of annoy me in a lot of dealings with entertainment media is when people who are the studios or the higher ups, like with Sean and I both like talk radio, and when you have these DJs, who know what they're doing, who put on an entertaining show that their listener base listens to and enjoys, and they have some management down the hall behind some desk saying, "Hey guys, why don't you do this instead?" It throws off the show, and it doesn't add anything, and it just makes things a little bit more annoying. And I look at film the same kind of way, where you have this director who has the vision, or you have the writer who created it, and you gotta let the people who have the talent do their thing. It's now I can't say what they changed or any of that, and who knows, maybe it was a good deal or a good idea, but for me, I always say trust the talent. Those that can, do. And let them do what they do best. It's if they make the mistake, if the show, does, bomb and if they don't read their audience well, guess what? Next time there's a movie, that person won't get their big break. So the directors aren't going to take these wild, crazy risks on something they don't know is going to work. If you're only as good as your last movie, and if you drop a big bomb, they're going to look at you and say you messed up. And if it wasn't that director that messed it up, then that's just a big, hey, it wasn't me, it was them. Well, no one's going to believe.
What was the budget of this one again, though?
$200 million.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're dealing with a $200 million budget. I see both sides of it. I see them saying, "Hey, wait a minute, that's all well and fine, Jim, but
$200 million."
Right. I mean, and that's the honest truth on if any of that happening. I'm not saying that always it goes to the same problem you're talking about, where sometimes bad calls are made because of that. And we're speculating on this now, but I see both sides of it, and I see why people get involved. And when you're dealing with that kind of money, a $200 million tag, and you're like, "But if we put this sequence in, it'll make for a better film."
Are you sure?
Right. Well,
that's the whole and I understand that.
Right.
And it is a nature of business. It is a nature of movies are a gamble. You think, oh, movies is Hollywood, big money. Not necessarily big money. Yeah, your actor is getting that multi-million-dollar paycheck, but the studio that is needed, and especially when you get a high CGI, high technical aspect film, there's a lot of people behind the scenes that are doing a lot of grunt work, and they all get paid. And it's there's not much of for it to go around if it doesn't boom and capitalize.
Yeah, cool. I want to talk about Emerald Knights, this DVD release, direct-to-DVD release. And this was a cool story in the sense that they had multiple vignettes that were linked by this overarching story of Hal Jordan training Aresia while Krona is attacking the Guardians. So you get a lot of Guardian lore, a lot of history in all this as well, while at the same time you get to see these lanterns. And I thought this was cool because I liked the blur of, I couldn't tell if this was supposed to be linked to the film or to the comics. And I don't mean that as a negative. What I mean is it was so well written that I could see this connecting to the comic book world. I could see this connecting very much to the film world.
Yeah.
I really liked that aspect of it, in that there was kind of a gray area there for me. We had the story of the first lantern in the opening of this one. And I liked this idea of they didn't know when they were given these weapons, these rings, what they could really do and how to activate them. And the ones who were more warriors, who had been in battle, who were kind of encouraging the bookworm, we're saying to him, like, first battle, well, this is what you got to do, and kind of stick with this thing. And when he was going, the odds were against them. They were losing. And when he was going up there to do something, because he just felt that was the moment he needed to make his stand, feeling that this was going to be the end for him, but he's going to do his thing anyway, his imagination and the fact that he was so much a bookworm, he loved reading stories and being a part of all that, actually paid off for him, because that imagination was something he brought to life in that moment of dire straits. I really loved that story because it was such a great message of really setting a trend for the Lanterns and who they were going to be, and how that courage was so important in that moment, because he stepped up, and in the moment where things were at its most dangerous for him, he used his willpower and fought past it with making the first construct.
That was just so awesome that the geek, leads the day, and, he takes command, and he is the reason that they have victory. And I loved the fact that, it was kind of a little thing towards those of us who are the little bit more bookwormy and less, physical. And I thought that was just a nice, just great way to introduce who he was. And also, it was a nice connection with that Hal was making to Arisia, because she's like, hey, I'm just a student. Why am I here? I don't worry, I shouldn't have this ring. I was like, well, I guess, I think he kind of felt the same way when he got his first ring. And it was, great just connection to the story. And that was something I really got out of Emerald Knights, that I didn't know that was what the story was going to be about. When it was first out, I really didn't read any of the teasers or anything to it. I thought it was a continuation from First Flight. And I thought, okay, this is First Flight Part 2, or this is the second movie in the series. So when I started watching it, going, wait, this isn't that. What the heck is it? This is cool. Oh, this is about the Green Lantern Corps. Hey, I'm digging.
And it's what Avra? It's Mitchell Whitfield who did the voice of Avra, the First Lantern. Yeah. Which it's funny, they were labeling the First Lantern, but it was actually the fourth of the first four. But he was really considered the First Lantern because he was the first one that used the ring the right way. Go ahead, Myron.
Well, I was just going to say that this is an original story written by Mark Guggenheim. This isn't based off of any of the Green Lantern lore. This was a completely original tale. But what I really liked about this movie overall was that these vignettes, or these small stories, played into the training of Arisia, because they applied to what she was feeling. The connective tissue made those little vignettes seem very appropriate stories for her to hear.
It's my favorite one was Lyra. I've always loved the character, but seeing that, first of all, and it wasn't just the actual visual of the fights, which I thought were tremendous, because I love a good, well-scripted battle sequence.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought that the number of one-on-one fights she had in there, and getting to see the different ways she used constructs as more of a martial art form, I really loved that, and the sense of history and proud nature of this warrior race, and I thought it was cool. I loved all that. The musical score during that whole fight sequence, and everything that she did in that, was something that really stood out for me, and I thought it added to my sense of adventure and my sense of... I love martial arts films and Japanese animation because of this sense of... There's a history to the fighting, and that they train to get there, and it means something. And honor is a really strong suit there, and how the father's honor was gone, and there was resentment of his daughter that she got the ring and she called for help, and she was the one at that moment. It was the Lanterns that kind of overtook everything, and he never had his moment where he got to save his honor, and he almost resents her because her calling for help took that away from him in his eyes, and that he should have had the ring and he should have been the one to do that. I loved that whole story because it was really about her showing how far she'd come, that she isn't the person who's always going to call for help. There's more to her than that. She's trained herself and honed herself to become very much the warrior leader that her race has always needed, and the protector that her race has always needed, very much honoring the traditions that her father wanted for their race. And she proves at the end that, I am that warrior, and he's got to look at her in the face. But I also loved during the battle that as they were fighting, you saw these little cubes open up with the images of her as a child. And it was a tragic story of the relationship with a father and a daughter that's deteriorated over time. And I kept expecting him to look at one of those images and connect with her further. And instead, he was fighting against them because he kept saying, you'll always be the one that calls for daddy. And it was something that I really liked throughout that one. That was my favorite sequence.
That was just you're talking about just the individual fight sequences, and I like the one when she showed up and the one guard after the first fight with the dad's mistress, and she lands
who she beat the tar out of. Yeah. But we have mommy issues, and we don't like the new stepmom.
Did not like her, and she opened up. But when she first dealt with that first guard, and she's standing there, she's like, we can either go or not. It's your call. And he's just like, and all the guards just sidestepped and like, okay, let her, this is a family issue. I thought that, you mentioned honor, that was a great sequence of just respect for who she is. She was, the princess. She was this warrior, who, had their respect and who, needed her place, and just, hey, this isn't our fight. This is, the brother next and then the dad. And everybody knew where this was going out. And I thought that was just a great, just one usage of the character, nice, laying out the story piece by piece, and that was a very fun, really just intense story, and I liked how they threw that in there. Now
Kelly Hu was the voice of Lyra too. And the voice casting in this, Nathan Fillion was Green Lantern. We'll talk more about the voice cast, I think, as we talk about different vignettes and stuff. But I thought he was really fantastic, because he did some narration during this as well. Obviously, because he was telling her the stories of each of these vignettes. And I always like him, anything he's in. And it was great to see him in this, and he felt like Hal.
He's got a Hal Jordan voice. He has that heroic quality, the fun quality, the serious, intense nature to him. He, a great voice casting.
Have you ever seen the fan trailer with him as Hal?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
he would have been good if he was just a little younger. If the movie had been filmed like 10 years ago, he'd have been perfect.
He also wanted to play Nathan Drake in the Uncharted film. Yeah. And I would have loved to have seen that. I think him as Nathan Drake would have worked very well.
Oh, yeah.
There's a casting in that one. Jason Isaacs is Sinestro, and he was great on that. Elizabeth Moss is Arisia. And I always call her Arisia still. I think it's ever since I was a kid. I don't know where I got that in my head, but I'm stuck with it. Henry Rollins is Kilowog. Kilowog's sequence I thought was really great. Seeing him with his original trainer.
I loved that story, and I thought it was a great story. The only thing that I wished is they would have had Arlie Ermey for the voice of his trainer. I think because even in the comic when they showed him, they called the trainer before it was, I think, Ermey is what they called the Lantern Ermey, and they kind of made mimic the face after Arlie's face. And I think that he would have been just they didn't need to do a visual thing, but just having his voice as that drill instructor would have been awesome.
I agree.
But it told it's funny, and it's, as I'm saying, I wish they still told a great story, and that was just again showing Kilowog kind of taking not Kilowog Deacon. Taking the recruits, taking away their rings, putting them in just this potentially dangerous situation. But throughout the whole thing, you keep seeing Kilowog fighting back, and making sacrifices for his team. The volcano, and basically almost burning off his feet just to do the same
for his team, because he could have put himself first and sacrificed them, but he didn't do that. I loved that part of that whole thing,
and helping Tomar Ray and just and I was just like, this is just a great explanation as to why Kilowog is so cool and why he is such a great trainer. Because he's been pushed to the edge. He's he's had to, rise up above and beyond anything that a recruit should be able to do. And at the end of that sequence, when he's giving off the orders and like, yes, sir, and they're, going and taking care and following his orders, just as if he was a full-fledged 100% Green Lantern. I thought that was just, bam, nice, great way to end the sequence.
That moment when Deegan drew the Green Lantern logo on Kilowog's chest was perfect.
Yeah. Oh god, yeah. And especially even the fact that he used his own blood to draw the symbol added to it.
Well, and also I think it was a rite of passage. It was a nod in the right direction, and you showed that changes Kilowog's whole demeanor afterwards, recognizing that he needs to take a leadership role here in that moment. And he does. And it's funny how the other Lanterns immediately deferred, or the other recruits immediately deferred to him. They recognized what he had done. They recognized that Deegan had given him the nod. And there's immediate respect there, which shows how powerful Deegan's training really was. And that he may have seemed cruel and harsh, but they recognized that what he was doing really was to make them better. And it showed that they respected him, which a lot of times, there can be leaders who are cruel just for the sake of being cruel, and they get no real respect. He got real respect from them. And I really liked that distinction in this. Bullfunga. That's the next one I want to talk about with Mogo. So great to see those Roddy Piper, who was Bullfunga. And he was tremendous. Because you see, this in a space, in anywhere, not just in space. You see it so much in mob stories and things like that, where you're only as strong as your reputation. You're only as intimidating as your reputation. So for him, it's really about, if I want to be the most feared in the galaxy, I want to be considered the most powerful warrior in the galaxy. So what would my next target be? The one that they're touting as the most powerful, being Mogo. And I know you're hitting yourself in the head going, I didn't realize it was Roddy Piper.
Oh my god.
But he was great. I mean, having a guy who's a professional wrestler playing this character, because he was this over the top. And it was great because it was Piper, but he captured the space character so perfectly, because I wanted to see how they were going to do this. And I love how you see Bullfunga. He had this plan to how to target He was tracking down Mogo, not realizing that he was on Mogo. and that Mogo was really tracking him the whole time. It wasn't the other way around. So to find out the tables were totally turned on you, and from the moment you were in probably before, from the moment you arrived, and even probably before that, you were already being watched by your enemy. And nothing that you were doing to be stealthy, nothing you were doing to gain the upper hand mattered at all. Yeah. You never stood a chance. For somebody who had accomplished as much as Bullfunga, to find that out, I loved how that played off. Where eventually through all the all of his intimidation, all of his bravado and everything, at the end, realizing what he was dealing with Mogo, made him turn tail and run.
Take off! No!
I thought it was great that they got Dave Gibbons to come in and do the adaptation.
Yes, very much so. And it worked very well. Because it was funny, like you said, these were original stories, and I knew that they were interpretations of, things that actually happened in the comics, but then you could argue that these were supposed to be set in the movie universe as well. And I always felt that in theme and tone and presentation, it felt like they could have been set in the comics world. So it was a nice blur of what universe does this really take place in, and does it really matter? No, because at its core, it's doing what it's supposed to do. It's introducing you to each of these characters. Like Lyra, I could see her as being the Lyra who's now part of the Red Lantern Corps. And this is a great origin to her. It actually added to me more interest in seeing where she's at now, because I care even more about this character because of her vignette. The Bullfunga thing got me more interested in Mogo and what he really brings to the table. Loved Kilowog's origin. Each of these little vignettes did just a fantastic job of, I thought, spotlighting these amazing characters all the way through. Abin Sur, a character who I loved his introduction in the film. I'm loving what they're doing with him in Flashpoint right now. seeing the spotlight on this character. So to get more opportunity to see a story set with Abin Sur, with actually, and this connected, I thought, pretty well with a lot of the lore we see in the current Green Lantern comics with Abin Sur.
Because it also had the Atrocitus.
Yes.
How Atrocitus had the vision and, telling him what Sinestro's going to do, and just all of that laid out. I was like, oh, this is awesome, because that immediately got me thinking, okay, they can do more of these, and we may actually see an animated version of Blackest Night, an animated version of the Sinestro Corps War, animated of all this stuff that we're seeing right now in comics. We may get to see eventually an animated version of it.
Well, I think they're supposed to do an animated. Well, I don't know now with the film. They might not do something like that, the animated Sinestro Corps War, because, the second film is supposed to tackle that. And I can't imagine them saying, hey, do an animated version of this, and then afterwards we'll release a live-action, big-budget version of it. That doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense to do. But what I liked about this was, and where I think it does tie into the movie and what it does a great job, is it sets up for anybody watching the movie a history of Sinestro's eventually going to turn. And I like that Abin Sur didn't accept that. Mm-hmm. He knows Sinestro better than this, being does, Atrocitus, and I don't care what your visions say, that's not Sinestro.
Yeah, I know my friend. Yeah. I know, what he is about, and that was just a really neat portion of it, and it got me thinking on what if Abin Sur hadn't died. Mm-hmm. What if Sinestro had that friend that he could turn to, and that comrade that he had respect for. Would we be seeing, the Sinestro Corps? Would we have everything that Sinestro did? Would that actually have occurred?
Well, I think we're going to see that in Flashpoint Abin Sur.
Yeah.
Because we're clearly seeing a history here of what it would be like if Hal never became a Green Lantern.
Yeah.
Because Blackest Night's already happened in that world. So what's going to happen leading up to it? I'm sure we're going to see some of that in the 3-issue Abin Sur series, I hope.
Yeah, it'd be nice. Well, we've already seen the fact that Sinestro still is a Green Lantern, so
and he's already confronted Atrocitus for the Flashpoint.
Yeah.
What is the Flashpoint, and how is Sinestro going to react to that? Those are things that I get excited for. So a lot of these what ifs that you're talking about that you got turned on to in this DVD, I agree with, and it's stuff that we are seeing playing out in Flashpoint. So it's kind of cool. That's why I said this was a nice companion piece to the comics. It's also a nice companion piece to the film, and I like that blurry nature of this. Clearly it was meant to be kind of a lead into the film, but I think there's something for both audiences with this. So if you missed this direct-to-DVD release, do yourself a favor and pick this one up. Oh, actually, we never really talked about this at the beginning. How did you guys rate this? Like, Myron, how did you rate this overall as a Green Lantern story?
I gave this a 4 out of 5. I thought it was really, really good in terms of being a primer for the Green Lantern mythology for anybody who isn't familiar with it already. It really did that. Plus, it showcased what's really cool about the Green Lantern universe is that it lends itself to anthology stories because there are so many characters and the scope is so grand that there's so many places you can go. This really spoke well for the whole mythology.
Jim?
I'm giving it a 5. This was an absolutely amazing story, and it was just a Green Lantern Corps story. And I've always said that for me, my favorite part about the Corps is the fact that it is the Corps. It's not just one individual Green Lantern or this guy. I do have characters that I like more, but it's the strength of the overall unit, and just their interactions and their dealings with each other. The fact that they call for backup when they need help, I like seeing that, and it gives me an element of realism to the fact that they have these rings that they can use pure willpower to construct things. It adds the realism to it.
I totally agree with Myron. It's a 4 out of 5 for me, except what turned it into a 5 out of 5 for me was that Lyra. I have watched that Lyra sequence. I'm not kidding on this 6 times already. What worked for me with that sequence of events was the dialogue between her and Dad's rationalizations as he was talking to her, and just how proudly he was carrying that, how right he felt he was. Such an imposing villain that it's hard to make a father who loves his daughter such an imposing villain for his daughter. And it really did make him that, because he was venomous in coming after her. Yet you knew in there somewhere, you needed a brick upside his head to find it. He loved his daughter in there too, and that kind of duality, establishing that in an animated piece, was just woof. I knew so much about that race and that sequence of events right there. It made me love Lyra as a character that much more. Now I'm like, whoa, this is a character who I want to go back and read more of her comics, her appearances. I want to really get wrapped around this character a little bit more. She was fantastic. I mean, it was just such a great, well done sequence of events. The whole thing, I thought, came together extremely well, because it's hard to tie in vignettes. And it's what I'm liking about these 80-page giants and the annuals, some of them, when they have an overarching story like this, and the little vignettes tie into some cool story at the end, but there's the opportunity for each one to have its own unique personality. All of these vignettes had their own unique flavor, which is a testament to the people writing them, that they still felt like they belonged as a part of this film. Yet, and there was a reason for them being there and what they were telling Arizia about the history of Green Lantern. I'm actually getting used to calling her Arizia. I'll go back to Arizia, trust me, because I'm stuck on it. But I'll at least end this one off calling her Arizia. So don't worry, it's a passing phase. But I really liked how this all came together at the end to this fight with Krona. And just the him coming out there and them putting Oa on the line, the planet of Oa on the line, because of a gamble due to this new Lantern who was thinking outside the box, just showing that each new Lantern brings something new to that. You talk about calling for backup, not just calling for backup. It's why do you bother? Because each member of the team is going to bring something a little bit different, that no matter how long you've been a Lantern, that new person, because they're from a different planet, different race, different culture, different upbringing, different imagination and how they're going to think about battles and situations, is going to think. It could be a fairy tale they heard as a child. It can be their current job career before they become a Lantern. It can be something from their family background, whatever, the way they were trained, raised, whatever. They're going to all bring something a little different in the way that they look at how to deal with an opposing threat. And she saved the day with Krona, and they put their whole planet on the line to make that move. I thought that was great. And you talked about before how at the end of the film, would have been great to see this. This was a time where Hal's already been established. Push his butt right into the sun using all the lanterns at that moment. It was, and it wasn't until Mogo showed up on the scene that they were able to finally get the upper hand on Krona. I loved that sense as well, that no matter how many lanterns were there, it wasn't until Mogo showed up that they were really able to do something.
And I liked the fact that before Mogo showed up, when the Shadow Demon started attacking, you were seeing some of the lanterns peel off of the push and provide defense for those who are pushing. Again, that's great. Team dynamics, core, combat. You do have to cover. You can't just be, put the blinders on and only focus on pushing the planet into them, pushing them into the sun and whatnot. You do have to provide your defenses. And then first thing Mogo does when he shows up, bam, he drops an atom bomb, clearing out the shadows, and then they all hit with it was a nice 1-2 combo punch that I was like, yes.
Is there anything else you guys want to talk about with relation to this film? Myron, do you have anything else that you'd like to?
No. Although if you picked it up on Blu-ray, the extras were great, and it was great to have a commentary track back again.
Yeah, it's something I'd love to see more of with these, because to me, that's the whole point. These commentary tracks, getting to hear, I like that behind-the-scenes stuff. I'm a big fan of it. So you're right. Those commentary tracks are welcome. The extras are welcome. I even like when they do TV episodes and things like that when appropriate on these releases that are somehow thematically tied in to what they're doing. They're nice little bonuses, even though some of them I already have a couple times over because, I have the actual shows that they'll often put on these. You know what I do miss? The shorts.
Yeah.
Because we haven't had one in a while, and I always liked having a little animated short that went along with them. It's not a criticism. The film I'm getting is well worth the price of admission. Even if they just threw that bare bones on the disc. But I like those extras like a short. It made me feel like the old, like going into a Pixar movie or something like that, where you get that little something fun before you watch the main movie. And it's a good chance that would have been a good chance to spotlight a Guy Gardner or a Kyle Rayner or a Jon Stewart, like you're talking about earlier, Jim. Would be in a short film on this one to show how there are other Earth Green Lanterns, and here's what they do in a little short feature. Cool film. Guys, one of the things I'd like to talk about before we wrap up this particular episode. Green Lantern also had some gaming that came from this, the Rise of the Manhunters game. And I know, Jim, you don't have any of the games, but I want to talk a little bit about them, and you can throw in your own questions or thoughts on just gaming in general. There's been different releases of this. I'll start first with, I think I'm the only one that has this version, the iPod version, and I'll just talk about it briefly, what it is. This is a straight-up shooter, and it's kind of like, I was a big fan growing up of the video game Tail Gunner, where you got inside the cabinet and you had this little stick and you had like the in space Star Raiders, I'm sorry, where you could you basically just all you had was the targeting system. Well, instead of the targeting system in this one, you've got Hal in the middle of the screen, and if you hold down onto Hal, a shield pops up, a Green Lantern, from the ring, like not a Captain America shield, but it's a typical. Actually, looks more like the Manhattan Guardians shield. Pops up right in front of him, formed entirely from the energy. Manhunters keep coming at you in different sectors through the storyline. And what you need to do in this shooter is take down all the Manhunters before they accomplish their goals. And there's a story-driven vignette that goes along through this whole thing. I liked a lot of the mechanics of it, because what you can do is through holding onto the screen, you can target multiple Manhunters and Hal will take them out. As the game goes on, there's different tricks you can learn through tapping the screen in different ways. There's also opportunities where you're being hit by asteroids and things like that, and different kinds of space debris, where you have to have Hal dodge all of those. None of it is ground combat. It's all space combat, where Hal is constantly flying. And it's meant to be it's a cheap game. It's only a few bucks. It's I think $3 at the most, maybe a little bit more than that. I don't remember. All those iPad games are relatively cheap. If it was $6, that's the highest that it could have been. I don't remember what I spent for it. They just recently released, it's the same game, the update that allows you to play it full screen on the iPad. Before I bought the iPod version and I was playing it on my iPad in like the mode where you've got like an iPod-like screen and you can double size it. Now it actually takes up the full screen. The graphics are really sharp. It's not like high def like your current game systems, but they're really sharp graphics. I mean, it's clearly that it's HAL and the constructs look good and stuff like that. It's a cool little cheap diversion game for somebody like if you're going to have 5 or 10 minutes here and you just want to play around and dick around with some space shooting in the Green Lantern universe. It's cool for that. So I considered it a worthy purchase because it was, like I said, only a few bucks to have this thing, and it's a fun game on that end. It doesn't have a ton of variety to it. It's a shooter. It is what it's meant to be, but I had a lot of fun for that one. So let's switch thrusters to the one that Myron has as well. Rise of the Manhunters, which is for the consoles, like the 360, the PlayStation 3, that game, which is a story. It's set on Oa. The Manhunters have come to Oa, and their goal is to, at first, attack the central power battery. And throughout this story, you're playing as Hal Jordan, but you're interacting with Kilowog, Sinestro. And this one, it's a very linear game, which isn't a bad thing, because it's story-driven, where you go through set levels like any other adventure game. But along the way, as you gain experience, meaning as Hal learns, you get access to new constructs, and you can use the constructs as often as you want, as long as you have enough energy to do it. But the more fighting that you do, then you get these super power-ups where you hit the two buttons together and Hal becomes supercharged. In some cases, it means that it will totally refill his lantern energy, and for a brief period of time, it's like, he just charged up from the power battery, and he is able to use unlimited constructs for that brief period of time before starting to wear down again. When you're in missions where you're flying, you have this real cool bit when you do that where Hal makes the jet construct around himself, and you fly the jet, which then you're using missiles from the jet during that sequence, and that stays in place until the power wears down at that moment. So you get this sense of his, he's able to really do like the oath and charge up his ring. Myron, what do you think of the game overall? Where are you at on it, and what has your impressions been in playing it?
I really enjoyed the game. It was a lot of fun. It plays a lot like Gears of War or Star Wars Force Unleashed, but it's not really a button masher. You do have to think about when you're taking on some of these guys, what abilities do they have and what ability do you have that counters it pretty well. That was a lot of fun. I also played it in 3D, which added a whole nother dimension, to the game. But I thought it was really cool. I think the studio that developed the game, now the Xbox and PS3 version are by a different studio than the ones that made it for the Nintendo. So I don't want people to think about it being the exact same game because they're very, very different. But the studio that designed it for the PS3 and the Xbox, they made kind of a smart decision of not trying to make it so that Hal could fly during all the other levels, the ground-based fighting levels. He could kind of hover, and that was it. One of the things that tends to happen a lot in superhero games is the flying doesn't go well when you're doing ground-based combat levels. So they were really kind of smart in separating the flying levels from the ground-based combat levels. I thought it was kind of cool to be able to power up and get different constructs and level yourself up. Some of the constructs are really kind of cool. Now, I don't know if they did this on the PS3. I have the Xbox version, but they actually had it so you could download another skin for Hal and give him a movie-inspired version of the comic book costume.
Oh, no, I haven't seen... I'm not saying that they don't have that. I haven't gotten that, though, yet. So that's a very neat idea. I'm assuming that's if they don't have that, I'm sure that they'll have some version of that eventually. A lot of those exclusives wind up being temporary exclusives, and then or they'll give you something else for the other system later. So I don't know.
Yeah, and it was only temporary on the Xbox Marketplace as well. It was there for like 2 days, and then it went away. Now, one of the other cool things they did is they did come out with an Xbox theme, a movie-based theme, and they came out with, on the Xbox they have the avatars.
Yeah.
They have a Green Lantern costume and a Green Lantern t-shirt for your avatar, which is kind of cool. But the game itself, a little repetitive in places, but it was really cool to just kind of take it out against the Manhunters. If you have a buddy, they can sit down and jump in and play as Sinestro. And there's a lot of fun in grabbing somebody with a claw and throwing it at your partner who's got the baseball bat, and he hits the Manhunter across the screen. There's something really satisfying about that.
Oh, that's cool. That's something I would want to play in a Green Lantern game, being able to do the nice little combo moves.
And partners, like if you're already playing and like let's say somebody comes over to your house, they can jump in at any point in time. So you don't have to like stop playing your game and start a new game. You could do that, but you can say, "Hey, while I'm getting really far on this, hey, jump in and join me and let's kick some booty."
And they jump in at the exact same level you're at, so it isn't like they're depowered down to the base level either.
Yeah, which is really great because they have they have access to all the constructs you've unlocked.
Ooh, that's nice.
Yeah, so it's a really cool game. The story's good. It feels like a Green Lantern story, which is really important to me in these games. Like, because I don't mind that it's a more linear game, as long as the story's engaging, and the story is very engaging as you go through, which is something that was a draw for me.
Now, is Sinestro the only buddy you can have, or can you pull in like Tomar Ray, Kilowog?
Unfortunately, it's just Sinestro. I wish you had your choice.
I wonder if later through downloads, if the game sells well, because nowadays it's very common for a lot of these things to be available or unlockable in the game as time goes on. If you won't be able to maybe play as one or two other lanterns through these stores, because I do think nowadays your gaming companies deliberately do stuff like that to further monetize their games. Like you would go to the marketplace, then for $5 you get a character pack where you can play as two other lanterns or something. I would like to see that. I hope that they do release that opportunity to play as one or two other characters.
Yeah, that would be great. I know they did that with Marvel Ultimate Alliance, and it really added a lot of gameplay. Yeah,
because you want to go back again and play as the other characters.
Yeah.
So it's good. This has been a great time to be a Green Lantern fan because there's a lot to love. And if you don't like one thing, there's other choices out there of entertainment. So like if you're a gamer and you're like, I didn't, guys, I think you're crazy. I didn't really care much for the Green Lantern games. You've got the DVD. If you don't like the DVD, you got the film. If you don't like the film, I don't know what to tell you. But but I mean, there's a lot of opportunities for exposure to this character, whereas we've been used to in the past. You get one shot done. That's why and then we got an animated series on the horizon, which I'm hoping definitely goes through and takes place, because I'm really enjoying this, seeing so much. I mean, it's Green Lantern.
Yeah.
Who would have thought? Have you guys seen that YouTube video with Hawkman wanting a movie?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, you got to. It's on our Facebook page. One of our listeners, and I apologize for not knowing off the top of my head. I think it was a couple listeners actually who posted a link to this, and I thank you for doing it. It's Green Lantern is going to a bar, and he's meeting up with various members, not just of the Justice League who have had films, but Marvel's characters like Wolverine's there, Thor's there, and they're all talking about
anybody who's been on the screen.
yeah, and Batman's behind the bar. And it's the Christian Bale, I am Batman, behind the bar, and you don't realize he's there until later when they make a crack about that voice. So they're congratulating Hal for finally breaking in. Well, Hawkman shows up, and they're all laughing because they're like, uh-oh. None of them told Hawkman. He's that guy. None of them told Hawkman that they were going to be there, but he saw it on, I think he said, a Facebook or something like that. So he comes watching and strolls down and sits down, and he's trying to get his buddy Hal to get him in with the studios because he's got the script. And they're like, because they're like, well, dude, you got to have a script first, because they're trying to find any way they can to get out of this conversation with him about having a Hawkman film. Because they're like, you're Hawkman, and what's going on with your winged up and all this. So he brings in the script and he's got it. And then they're like, well, it's a really intense script, maybe just a treatment, thinking that he won't have he comes out with a treatment. And they're doing everything in their power to try and get rid of him. And when he's, and Hal's just like, well, I got to understand, I'm really new at this, so I'm not that in with the studio heads. So he pawns him off on Wolverine, and Wolverine pawns him off on Superman. And honest Superman, who's been drinking a little bit, gives him the what if. It was just, it's a great, it's on YouTube, on our Facebook page, it's still on there. One of our listeners, a couple of our listeners, like I said, posted it, and thank you again. I apologize for not knowing your name off the top of my head. I try to, on our forums, Facebook page, Facebook group, I try to keep up with everybody and everything. I read a lot on there, and I'm sorry if I don't respond to everything, but the posts that are put up there, a lot of times they'll drive discussions on the show because I'll hear things that people are talking about, and I'm like, oh, this would be kind of interesting to bring up on the podcast. So thank you for everybody that participates in the various areas, whether it's our forum, the Facebook group, or our Facebook page. You're participating in the show. I love that kind of stuff for just this reason, because I wouldn't have known about that YouTube video. But go see it. It's very funny. I'll try to, if I think of it, I'll embed it on our website so people can see it there.
I'll hunt it down. I'll find it.
Yeah, I have a plugin now on the website where I can embed YouTube video on the site. So I'll do that for the YouTube Hawkman video. So anybody listening to this right now, it will actually be, by the time you hear this, it will be able to be viewed on our site because it's very funny.
Cool.
And I'll give credit to our listeners who, posted it up on our when I go to do that. But it's very funny. Anyway, guys, Myron, first of all, I want to thank you again for joining us. And I know you're going to come back in a couple of weeks, and we're going to talk about the wrap-up of War of the Green Lanterns. But tell everyone, first of all, not only just about the blog of OA, because by now a lot of our listeners should know all the way about that, but the podcast of OA. What is that? How did it come about? I'm excited. You told me about this in the email, and I know it's just getting set up now on iTunes, so I'm going to subscribe to it that way to make sure I have it on my podcatcher. But blog of OA, podcast of OA, what are you doing?
I keep asking myself the same question.
Hey, wait, welcome to my world, buddy.
Well, it has, the last few months with all the Green Lantern news, keeping track of the blog has been almost a part-time job in and of itself. And I work with a gentleman named Bill Giancoli, excuse me, I mispronounced it, who runs Get Your Geek on Radio, which is an internet-based free web radio channel that has Raging Bullets on it, as well as a bunch of great music and some other content. And he and I were chatting, and he's just coming off of having a baby in the family and looking for something to do. And we were talking about going to the midnight showing for the Green Lantern movie. And when we got done, he said, I've been itching to do a podcast. Why don't we do a podcast for your blog? So we sat down the day after the midnight showing and spent a couple hours just chatting via Skype about our own thoughts about the movie, some of the criticisms of the film, where some of them were justified, where some of them were really overly harsh, and talking about comic book movies in general. And we ended up with, as you guys are well aware how it goes, we ended up with a 2-hour conversation that we'd recorded. So we decided, well, there's enough content out there, there's enough to talk about, that we could probably do a podcast on a fairly regular schedule. What that is yet, we haven't decided. It depends on our schedules. We're hoping, we're already working on an episode number 2. We already have some thoughts about what we're going to talk about. But it is available on the blog of OA. So there's several ways you can get to the podcast. It's on the blog of OA. There's a streaming player right on the main front page. You can subscribe to it through an RSS in your favorite podcatcher. I've submitted it to iTunes. It's been accepted, but I don't think it's shown up there yet. Probably by the time this episode airs, it will be. So it'll be available that way, and I'm working to try to get on the Microsoft Zune Marketplace as well. So that's available a number of different ways, but it will be all Green Lantern talk. We're going to hit into everything from the comics to the movie to the animated series when it comes out, and having some other kinds of conversation about the character and the character universe. One of the things we're going to talk about in the next episode is Green Lantern a relevant character for the 21st century? So it's really going to be all about everything green you could ever think of.
Are you guys going to look into the past of the character as well, do you think? Or
I think so. Bill doesn't have... Bill's a very... my co-host Bill is a very well-versed comic book reader. He's a fan of Green Lantern, but doesn't have the history that I have, which should be a very interesting dynamic, much in the way that when you guys started out, Jim, when you were just starting to really get back into comics again, to look at it from a different perspective. And a lot of it will be how much time does he have to read the source material to catch up? Because with a young family, that is that's obviously the more important commitment than to my podcast. But I hope so. I hope you go back and examine some of the old stuff too.
One of the things that I really liked about Bill, I loved his whole idea of doing the internet radio show as just kind of and pulling in podcasts as a way to kind of reach content in a different way. And it's actually, if you look at our show notes, Get Your Geek on Radio is always listed in our show notes every week because of the fact that we've been on there. So we're big fans of Bill and what he does. I'm thrilled that you guys got hooked up, and I'm anxious to listen. So very cool.
It'll be fun. He is formerly from Boston and was a stand-up comedian for a while. So when he and I get together, he and I actually work together part of the time. And when he and I get together, it's always a hoot. So we're hoping to have a more lively discussion. We were a little, this first episode was the first one we did. We didn't have any plan. So it's a little scattered because we're just getting started and just trying to learn the ropes as to how we should put together this kind of a show. And we were both a little melancholy after watching the film and seeing some of the reviews. We weren't exactly our most cheery. But it'll be hopefully at least entertaining for people.
And one of the great things about different podcasts and different takes on them is you get to get different flavors and different ways of looking at films and comics and things like that. So it's always fun. Plus, if you look back to our original episodes of the podcast, we're clearly not the show that we were at the beginning. I think that's part of the fun of podcasting is you kind of you find your way along the way, and your listeners journey along with you and are a part of that. So I encourage people, these guys have both been great supporters of Raging Bullets, and I encourage you to check out the podcast of OA and support them. I'm going to be really anxious to watch the growth of your podcast and its direction as time goes on, and I wish you guys a lot of luck.
Well, I appreciate it. And as I said before we started recording, it's both of your faults.
Well, blame the good stuff on me and the negative stuff on Sean.
I was thinking, Jim, we might ask you to record a theme song for us.
Guys, you guys are sick freaks.
But by all means, Sean, Jimmy, if you guys get a chance to listen to it, I'd appreciate your feedback in terms of things we can do to fine tune and make it a better show. If you don't mind giving me your
I will
criticism.
100% listen to it. One of the things I will, and this is actually true for any podcaster out there, people thinking of going into podcasting, I think it's really, really important for you to develop your own sense, and this really is kind of because I think we had that when we first got started, of who you are, what you're trying to do, what your overall direction is. We get a lot of today. We still get we get a lot of great positive comments. Sometimes we get new listeners. We'll get criticism because they don't quite understand the direction of what we're doing yet. And I think you can't try to be everything to everyone. You need to know who you are and why you're podcasting. So I think if you have a passion for what you're podcasting, whether, I'm not saying, when I say a passion, doesn't mean that you have to always be positive on your show. It just means that you have to know what direction you want to go in with your podcast. You're going to get an audience base that has been looking for that show all along. So I will definitely give you my feedback on it, but I always caution people whenever you're podcasting with any feedback, positive or negative, that you get for your own podcasts, to take what you can from it, but never lose sight of what your goal is for your podcast. Because I think ultimately that's where you develop your identity, is with you knowing the direction that your ship's heading in. And you can't find that, we're not the same show that we were in the beginning. We evolved that way gradually over time. And now I clearly know what we are, but that I didn't know that at the beginning. The whole premise of our show is completely different than it was at the beginning.
I feel very much about the podcast as I do about the site in general. I started the website just to have a creative outlet to talk about my favorite character, and it's grown into something much larger than I thought it would, for better or worse. I figured maybe I'd have a couple friends come and read it, and that'd be it. But it's really kind of grown into something bigger. So I don't know what the podcast is going to be yet. It's like the blog is. It's an experiment in progress. And
you know what? You end up taking it from somebody who started a podcast, and it's gone into a much longer, because we had a short-term plan for it, thinking that we would be done after that. And when we had to evolve to continue on to a podcast that now this will be episode 262, your direction comes from the fact that you're ultimately saying, hey, this is what we're having fun doing. This is what makes us want a podcast. And that's where you're going to find your next couple episodes that you guys are going to do. You guys are going to find, hey, this is what we really like doing. And that's where you're going to develop your direction. When you guys, you'll know. It'll click. It's not something that somebody can tell you. I can't tell you right now, this is what you've got to do for it to be that way. You guys will know. It's just, you two will feel it together where you're like, wow, that felt really good. And that's when you say to yourself, this is what our podcast should be, because we really enjoyed recording this. And if you enjoyed recording it, you're going to get an audience base. I hope so. We'll see. Yeah. Especially now. It's a good time to do a Green Lantern podcast. And so, all right. Well, Myron, as always, thank you for joining us again. We really had a great time with you. And I will be talking to you in a couple of weeks. So I look forward to it. It's been great to be a part of the show again. I'm very humbled that you continue to ask me back. Oh, no, we always have a great time chatting with you. So thanks again. Have a good one.
Like a human helicopter, the Flash rotates his body, rising faster, faster.
I want to remind everyone, our sponsors for this episode are DCBService.com, who are sponsoring our upcoming contest. And that's DCBService.com, your comic book pre-order source. And keep in mind, we're getting really, really close to July with this episode, and you're going to be seeing the new books up for next month. So check out DCBService.com for those great pre-orders. There's still time to order the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen Omnibus and the Legends of Dark Knight Marshall Rogers hardcover. So if you're interested in those books, go ahead and order them from DCBService.com. Over at InStockTrades.com, I want to remind everyone to check out the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. We're going to be reviewing this in August. That's League of Extraordinary Gentlemen Volume 1. Regularly $14.95, 38% off, only $9.27. This is a great chance to pick up that volume and join us for that discussion in August. Actually, with our Green Arrow Longbow Hunters episode, we're going to get back to at least quarterly doing a collection of something from classic DC. And this can be from DC, Wildstorm, Vertigo, any of the imprints. So I want to get that back into our show roster, so we're going to do it at least quarterly. Get one of those in there and try to keep it manageable while we're following that. So in August, right before the end of Flashpoint and we get into the relaunches of all these titles, we want to do one more classic trade. So we're going to do that in August before the end of Flashpoint. I want to thank DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com for continuing to support the show. Jim, I really don't know what we're doing next week. Well, the reason why is I've got a few friends of the show who I'm trying to have on, people who I've been wanting to have on during the year, but because of my school schedule, Jim's work schedule, I haven't had the chance to hook up and get them on the show. So I've got a number of friends of the show who I've lined up to fill in for you. You're going to be gone till July 15th-ish. So I'm going to need a couple of episodes while you're gone of the podcast. So we're going to have some longtime friends of the show come back on and fill in. So I'm trying to coordinate times with all of them. So I don't really know what our topic's going to be next week because I've got a number of things going that we're going to be doing on the podcast. Then we're going to also be recording with you live from Italy.
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, as we did last time you were there. So, and what we're going to discuss there, you're taking your current books with you, so we're going to discuss something DC-related from Italy. So, a lot of stuff coming on down the pipeline. So, check on the website and the show forums and stuff like that for information over the next couple of weeks of Raging Bullets. But, Jim, we will see you when we get back.
Bye.
Flying through space and time, 1,000 different lifetimes. Faded for love and flaws and incredibly clear sightlines. Swinging your mace around, such a practical outlook. Helping the JSA and occasionally supporting your own book. Hawkman, Hawkman. Eagle eyes can't see, Hawkman, your plan. What you do to me, Hawkman. The villains are closing in, be they Thanin Guard or Egyptian. Working so hard to thwart you and Hawkgirl's mission. The odds are not on your side, and danger seems to stack up. Things would be so much easier if you